you're live.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Thursday night episode of the Live Well here at Fish North Georgia. We appreciate y'all stopping by and saying, hey, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe if you hadn't already subscribed. We appreciate every one of y'all showing up. We got a dang good show for y'all tonight. We got a good special guest on the piped in tonight. To my left, we got Dave Aldridge, and then we got Tim McGuire running the boards. And we're going to hit our sponsors real quick, get them out of the way, and we'll get this thing started talking about some offshore fishing. First up, we've got Sonar Pros. Listen, guys, these are the official installer of the Live Well. If you're looking to get your boat installed, make sure you get with Trent and the guys over at Sonar Pros. Go where the pros go. You can take it somewhere else, but you're probably going to be taking it back to Trent to get it fixed. Don't skimp out when you can. Call 770-530-4505. Next, we've got Lip Sticker Fishing. Personally, I think best guide on Lake Lanier. I've been with him. I don't know if you guys ever been with Lip Sticker out on the boat with him at all. It's a dang good day of fishing. He puts on a show, and I saw, I think today or yesterday, last couple of days, he's been catching the megalodons out there. So if you want to book a guide with Kevin, call or text 678-459-8419 or Kevin@lipstickerfishing.com. Also, make sure you check out his Patreon. It's really good. He drops the juice on that thing. I can't believe what he gives away on live like that. So make sure you look at that patreon.com/lipstickerfishing. Next up, we got Evolve rod sleeves. If you guys hadn't tried Evolve rod sleeves, you need to try them. They are some dang good rod sleeves. They're neoprene rod sleeves. They float, hook resistant. They've got the protection on the tip. They've got the little rubber end around where you put your rod in at. It's got the tether that goes around the handle. They're really good rod sleeves. Check them out at Evolve Fishing. And next, we got the Money Saver Lure Retriever. You've got them right here on the table in front of us here. We've spent a lot of money on baits, and I'll be honest with you, I still got to get one from Danny. I'm out there on the lake, get something hung up, and you're like, "Where's my money saver at?" They get down there like a missile, knock your bait loose, get your stuff back. Don't have to worry about it. Make sure you check out the Money Saver Lure Retriever. He's got them here at the shop. Next, we got Bill Payne's Guide Service. Now, I've met Bill Payne. That man has more knowledge than I'll ever have when it comes to fishing. He's an awesome guy to talk to, and he's even better guy on the water. Give him a call if you want to book a trip on Allatoona. He does other smallmouth trips at other lakes on special request. Give him a call, 706-280-2305. And then we got Brooks Anderson Fishing. Super cool guy. I like talking with Brooks, just down-to-earth kid. I say kid, he's a young man. But if you're looking to get a trip on Lanier, get out there. If you're a young angler, you want to get started in your fishing career, Brooks caters to the younger anglers. He wants to get those kids started in fishing. Give him a call. Brooks Anderson Fishing. You can find him on Facebook. I know he's got a YouTube channel. He's always catching the bigs too. I think he was out there. I want to say I saw he was out there was it Doc Holliday was with him? One of the guys was on there on Facebook. I saw. I think it was Doc Holliday.
See him on the Elite Series.
Yeah. So you'll see him. Yep. Very soon. Next, you got Fishers of Hope. Their mission is to glorify God, be servants of the word, and to bring those in need to peace and hope that only he can bring. All right. Look, they're always putting on fishing tournaments for folks that need help. And I've talked with Tony personally myself. He messaged me, super nice guy. I mean, one of the most just down to earth, genuine people, and they need your help when it comes to, tournaments and things like that, going and paying in tournaments. I know if you can't make it to the tournaments, you can at least donate to them, and that way they can fulfill their goal. And you can find them on Fishers of Hope Ministry at gmail.com. Send them an email, get in contact with them. Tony will get back with you, I promise, and make it happen. All right. And then we've got our new sponsor down at the bottom there, Tim. Big League Charters out of Knoxville, Tennessee. That's USCG Captain Robert Rablowski. I talked to him earlier today, and Rob's an awesome dude. Y'all, he's been on the show several times. But Big League Charters, he's out of Knoxville, Tennessee. He offers guide trips on Watts Bar, Chickamauga, Tellico, and Fort Loudon, as well as Douglas Lake. He targets smallmouth, largemouth, and spotted bass year-round. He's got winter crappie trips December through March on Chick, and he does electronics training with forward-facing sonar and regular sonar, Garmin Lowrance Humminbird. Hey, it's fun for beginners and serious help for tournament anglers. So, let's go fish. Get with Rob if you're looking to get some guided trips on those lakes, because I'm telling you, I've never fished Chick. And if I go up there, I may actually get with Rob to do a trip up there because I've never fished. And, dragging my boat up there to get, skunked is not going to be my idea of fun. So y'all get with him, check him out. And then if you're wanting to, sponsor the show, please get in touch with Danny at FNGO.com. We want to get your business out in front of all the viewers that we get on this show. And there's a lot of loyal fans and viewers that watch live, that watch the recorded, version of this. Make sure you get with Danny, get on the screen so we can get you out there in front of everybody. I think that's all we got for sponsors. So it seems like they're getting more and more. It's just longer, having to get longer winded with it. Well, guys, we're going to get started talking about some offshore fishing today. Who we got in the comments? We got anybody in the comments yet?
Comments pulled up. Everybody's
Archie Lee. You can see Rob. What's going on, my buddy? Gary Harth, Bristol, Virginia. Heck yeah, buddy. Bristol, Virginia. I think that might be
tuning in from Virginia.
Gary Heath. I think that might be a new name on there. Coleman, what's up, buddy? CF Fishing or Sea Fishing. Love seeing the lip sticker truck in the parking lot. There we go. Adam W. Fishing with Farmer. Cranking and Yanking. What's going on, buddy? Good to see you in here.
There's no kids here tonight, Cranking. Yeah, no kids. I didn't bring them, so you can speak freely, sir.
No kids in here tonight. And then we got Coleman. How about them Braves? LOL. Got beat by 1 run today, I think. It wasn't. My wife's in the house. Hey, what's going on? She had the day off today, so she got to run around being a responsible adult on her day off. So Leo Mo, what's going on? All right, guys. We're talking offshore fishing, and we've got probably the best person that I could think of to talk about offshore fishing, and that is Mr. Jonny Schultz. He's here with us tonight, and we're so happy to have him on the show. Jonny, thank you for agreeing to come on the show with us and talk some offshore fishing. I told him in the email that I sent to him, I said, everything I've learned about offshore, I learned watching his stuff. If you're not familiar with Jonny, he's, Fish the Moment on YouTube. He's the co-owner of Core Tackle, and we appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
I appreciate having me, guys. It's
absolutely
great opportunity to talk to a bunch of new people, and excited to talk about offshore fishing. It's my favorite thing to talk about in the whole world. So hopefully we can get into a bunch of stuff tonight.
Absolutely. Well, listen, guys, if you've got questions, this is your opportunity to ask those questions. Because you know how many times I've watched one of his videos and gone, I wish I could just ask him a question like, what is he doing? What's in his mind? What's going on right here? And Cranking, Yanking. Lady in the house, still need to watch myself. Cranking, I was in the Marine Corps. You're probably not going to say much that she hadn't heard before. So you'll just keep it civil is all I ask. Just keep it civil. But yeah. So Jonny, we're going to get started real quick. Just give us, for those that may not know you, give us a little background about yourself. Anything that you want to share with us about your business, about your YouTube and your history in fishing. We'd love to hear it.
For sure. I'll try to keep it kind of short here, but basically I've been doing YouTube for about 7 years now, full time, and bass fishing instruction. And it kind of all started from fishing the junior circuits back when I was younger. I actually used to compete in the Casting Kids tournaments, or I guess competitions. And I was a 2-time national champion for the Casting Kids. And that kind of got me into the fishing industry when I was pretty young. So I actually had several sponsors like Triton Boats, Mercury, Strike King, a bunch of other companies from the time I was like basically 8 years old until now. And I have done a lot of seminars and things when I was younger. And I kind of fished, I guess, a ton of tournaments all over the country, did the college fishing for a few years. And then I kind of got out of the tournament scene of fishing. I didn't really find as much enjoyment in tournament fishing and traveling specifically. It just wasn't the lifestyle I wanted. So I ended up getting my MBA, worked corporate for a few years in digital marketing, and basically just kind of refound my passion for fishing while I was in corporate. I wasn't really enjoying the corporate world all that much, to be honest. So I just started making YouTube videos about offshore bass fishing, because that's what I did in my tournament days and kind of what I just love doing. And it's how I was successful in a lot of tournaments. And so I started sharing just a little bit of knowledge I knew about offshore fishing, side scan, down imaging, 2D sonar, all the electronic stuff. And my channel started to take off. And fortunately, I was able to turn that into a full career in fishing. And now I've been doing it now for, again, like the past 7 years, and have a lot more experience now in the water. I'm able to fish all the time and have learned so much from that. And as much as I fished when I was growing up in high school and college, when I was on the lake almost every day, I feel like I've learned more since then. So it's been really cool to be able to share that. I feel like I have a really good audience on my YouTube channel that appreciates the high quality content I make. And so hopefully we can share some of that with you guys tonight.
Absolutely, man. That's 100%. So I got one question, because I know it was one of those things we talked about before the show. We did. How old were you when you got your Triton sponsor?
So I was Earl reached out to me when I was 9 years old. So actually I was 8 years old now that I think about it. And I just won the Casting Kids National Championship on the floor of the Superdome. This is the old Superdome before Hurricane Katrina. And I was casting on the floor of the Superdome, won the national championship. They actually took me backstage, gave me the trophy, did all this publicity. My parents didn't know where I was. And I was an 8-year-old kid, and my parents were like, "Where's Johnny? What's going on?" And they like whisked me out of this like media room, and my parents were still looking for me. And I was like right in the Triton Boats booth. And my parents finally found me. And right when they found me, Mr. Bentz came up and he talked to me, and he's like, "Hey, if you are interested, we want to get you in a Triton jersey." And he grabbed this Triton jersey, and he had an extra small. And the extra small was about touching my top of my ankles. I was super short kid, and it was just a really cool experience. I still have the photo on the boat of the Triton where I'm sitting in a Triton boat, and I got my parents there. I'm holding the big check for the Casting Kids National Championship. And after that, I just kind of continued doing things in the fishing industry. And it's kind of weird because at this point, I've been to 22 Bassmaster Classics. I've been a part of the fishing industry, going to all these events, being sponsored by companies for the past 22 years. I'm 30 now. So it's been a long time in the industry. I've been fishing tournaments for a long time. Fished my first tournament when I was 8 years old. And so
I mean, you've got a career in fishing and the fishing industry, and you're 30 years old. And that kind of brings up a point we've talked about on the show before, where we get guys in here that'll say, "Well, these young guys don't know how to fish." Like, well, you might not know some of the history of some of these folks that are fishing against you. They may actually have a lot more experience than you're willing to accept. But anyway, so we got our first question in here. We got Rob got a question for us. What's your best tip for someone that utilizes forward-facing sonar for offshore, but since I can't use forward-facing for the NPFL, what are some secrets you can give up? I'm asking for a friend. LOL.
For sure. I mean, so that's the cool thing with what I'm doing right now with my content is I fish 1 day a week with forward-facing and 1 day without. And it's honestly, I was talking actually with a couple of pros. I'm not going to mention their names because I don't want to out anybody, but like they were talking about, these are MLF guys, and they went from the all forward facing to the one period of forward facing. And they talked about how difficult it was to make that transition. And they didn't think it was going to be that difficult, but basically going from having eyes under the water all day, every day to not having it, you have to completely change your mindset. But when you actually go back and forth, you learn so much that applies in both directions. So like I find that I can do things with forward facing sonar that probably anglers who don't know how to fish traditionally, they aren't able to really do, or they're not thinking about. And we can get into some of that here in a bit. And it's there's a lot to unpack there, but there's also the other way where you can take things you learn from forward facing sonar and apply it to non-forward facing sonar. So the best example I can give is actually from the Lake Murray tournament, Major League Fishing. I believe it was Lake Murray, and it was the one that basically guys were catching fish in the mornings in drains and guts, forward-facing sonar, bait ball fish. But in the afternoon, they would start dock fishing. And what they were doing with basically using a wacky rig worm or a Neko rig is that they would find these docks, and they were finding them in practice specifically using forward-facing sonar, figuring out which docks had bass around them, and also using their like second half of their periods to kind of practice and look for these docks. And when they knew there was a fish on a dock, what they would do is they would throw that wacky rig in there, and they would let that bait sink to the bottom and dead stick it for anywhere between 20 to 40 seconds. Then they would move it a few like feet, maybe a foot, and dead stick it for another 20 to 40 seconds. And they were literally fishing these docks for like 4 to 5 minutes per cast. But those fish would eat it sometimes 2 to 3 minutes into a retrieve. And this is something I figured out on forward facing, where you actually will watch these fish follow your bait. A Neko rig, it's one of the most popular baits. That's how Easton Fothergill won the classic. But dropping a Neko rig past these fish, they'll follow it all the way to the bottom, and then they'll pin that bait against the bottom. But it sometimes takes them 15, 20, 30 seconds to pin that bait down there. So what I've been doing a lot, I made a video about it most recent video I made, and it's been really effective, is you take a bait. I'll just pull up, like, this is the bait I throw that I designed specifically for this technique. This is the Core Tackle Weedless Wacky Shot. It's basically a wacky rig that has a weight on the shank versus on the head. and it has that little spring keeper that holds the bait on. This weedless version, it'll come through the middle of a brush pile every cast, the middle of a grass bed. You can throw it through the middle of any cover and it just comes straight back. But anyway, so what this does is it's falling, and when that bait hits the bottom, you'll watch these fish just kind of circle it and circle it and circle it. And all of a sudden they'll look at it and then maybe they'll pick it up. And I've been taking this bait and throwing it on offshore schools that are kind of setting up here and just getting offshore. And you can go right behind guys who just caught them on a crankbait, on a swim bait, hair jig, all the basic baits. Dead stick that worm down there, and those fish will absolutely crush it. But your casts are like 4, 5, 6 minutes long. And I would never do that ever if I hadn't seen it on forward-facing sonar. It's a painful technique. It's super slow. It's like one of the most boring ways of fishing. But when you can get a bite almost every single cast doing it right behind other anglers on ledges, and even it works in brush piles, basically any place where you know the fish are sitting there, it's deadly technique. And so that's like the number one thing I've learned from forward facing. There's a couple of other techniques I can talk about. I got other ones too, but that's like the first one that came to top of mind.
Well, you know, Rob's asking for any of the juice, so we'll squeeze it for all we can get for sure. I mean, it doesn't,
That's
you know,
some good juice. Right
yeah,
there.
that was actually, I mean, your point about it being a painful technique, like that's my big drawback with certain techniques, is because I'm like, I would probably lose my mind if I had to sit there and just unknowingly, you know, dead stick for a fish that may or may not be there. So on one hand, it's like the forward facing's great. On the other hand, it's not, because whatever. But I mean, there's some of those techniques I probably never would have picked up because of that. I mean, you know, so I mean, yeah, Dave fishes Gunnersville, so he gets fished a lot of ledges, so they're used to that. You know they're on the ledge, or you can find them on the ledge, and you got to work it through that ledge. And I mean, you were telling us about, you know, finding them this weekend on the ledge. I mean,
yeah, I mean, and I'm sure you have a progression of things that you go through. You know, when you pull up there and they're stacked up right, it doesn't matter what you're doing there. Yeah, most time they'll bite it. But like you said, and I'm probably on one of the most pressured lakes in the country when it comes to ledge fishing. A 10XD is great for a little while. Yeah. And then you go to a DT20 because it didn't make as much noise. And then you throw a football jig and you throw something else. By the time you get down, you're throwing wacky rigs and drop shots and everything else, because, you know, you may get the first spot to yourself, but after that, you're usually fishing behind somebody.
Yeah, I was going to say, the times I've been to Gunnersville when it was ledge season, it was bumper to bumper traffic. Yep. You had to drive 3 miles down the river just to go around them if you were going a different direction. So I completely understand that. Okay, cranking and yanking. I guess I'm the odd man out when it comes to forward facing. If I bought a boat that had one on it, I would tell them to take it off. Well, I mean, that's fair. Look, I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, listen, we were talking about it a minute ago, me not having my graph cover on, or me having the graph cover on one of the boat. There's lakes I go to where I don't need it. I don't use it. I say I don't need it. I don't need it anywhere, I guess. I don't use it. I don't have to. And then there's lakes where I just want to know what I'm fishing on, you know, and I think that's one of the things that, you know, drew me to Johnny, your channel, was because I learned how to use my 2D. I didn't grow up with, you know, parents that fished or anything like that. So I had to teach myself everything and learn it from folks that, you know, nice enough to do YouTube videos and whatnot, and learning the 2D and the, you know, down scan and side scan still kicks my butt. I'll be honest with you. That's the one thing I've got it up and I've got it dialed in and I look at it, but there's times where I'm going, I can't tell if that's a rock, a brush pile, or a fish. I don't know what's going on with it. So I'm still learning on that stuff too. So, but yeah, we got another question up there.
Yeah, Jim Wright.
Jim Wright, can you use any worm on the Neko rig?
So there's some worms I like and there's some worms I don't. The thing about a Neko rig, it's all about the fall rate. That's what people don't really get into. And this is all the nuances of like with the forward facing stuff. So I'm going to try to talk forward facing and non-forward facing both, because I do both. Like I literally split, my head is split like both days where I do both things. I try not to do both on the same fishing day because it's just too much to take in, because you have to like change your fishing style so much. But basically it's about fall rate. So like I'm just going to show you the weedless wacky because I have it in my hand, but we have like two sizes, the 1/8 ounce and the 1/28 ounce. The 1/28 ounce, it barely falls faster than the regular weightless wacky rig. And then the 1/8 ounce falls at a little bit faster pace. And I actually have sizes, like all the different sizes, because I'm co-owner of the company. So I fortunately have the privileges of having like every size ever that you would want. But the idea with the weedless wacky or a Neko is that the fall rate for those fish is really critical in the sense that if the bait falls too fast past those fish, they won't actually follow and track the bait and follow it back down to the bottom. So most of the fish I'm catching on this bait, they do two things. Either they're suspended in the middle of the water column already, the bait falls past their face, and then they track it down to the bottom. Again, if it falls too fast past them, you'll see it on forward-facing sonar. They'll follow it halfway down, and then they'll turn away. And what guys will do with forward-facing with the Neko rig is that they will basically tight line their Neko rig. So they'll use a heavier weight with a worm that has maybe a little bit less or more drag, whatever it is. And then they can get that bait to fall at whatever speed they want, because they can hold that line semi-slack or tight or whatever, and then make that fish follow it all the way down to the bottom. Without forward facing, you just have to kind of guesstimate what the right fall rate is on that given day and just kind of experiment. So it takes a little bit longer, more patience, but it's not impossible. I just have like 3 different sizes. I have these 2 sizes, and I have one other size that's in prototype right now. It's a 1/16 ounce. But anyways, with that, you want to make sure that the bait falls at the right speed. So on some lakes, they want the bait to fall slower. Some lakes, they're okay with the bait falling faster. So like on the Lanier, where you have really clear water, aggressive spotted bass, you can get away with a thinner worm, something more akin to like a robo worm, like a regular trick worm, things like that. But as you get to dirtier water, those fish have a harder time seeing the bait, so they want a slower fall rate. So that's where guys are throwing the Magnum hit worms, the Strike King worm that Easton Fothergill was using. I really like the old Yamamoto 6.5-inch cut tail worm. They discontinued that worm, which is very unfortunate. It was a pretty bulky worm. It had like a big bulbous tail, and it slowed that bait down a little bit, gave it a little bit more presence in the water. So usually what I'll do is match the worm to the water clarity and the speed at which it falls. And it's the speed that it falls that's more critical than anything. As long as that bass is willing to follow that bait, I'm like using my hands. Normally I have graphics on the screen, so it's harder with my hands.
No, you're fine.
As long as that bass is willing to follow that bait down to the bottom, that is what's going to trigger that bite. And sometimes the fish will, again, be suspended and they'll see the bait and they'll follow it down. Sometimes they'll be on the bottom. They'll see that bait fall and they'll actually come up off the bottom to inspect the bait and then follow it back down the bottom. So even the fish on the bottom will eat it. And this works around brush piles, shell beds, rock piles, standing timber. This is a great standing timber technique for like guys on Lanier. Graph the trees with 2D, find the ones that have the better quality fish in them, drop that Neko rig down through those trees. You can do it with and without forward facing. And this weedless wacky, I was actually catching him on Table Rock the other day, trees in 40 foot of water. I graphed him with 2D sonar. I have my settings set, and I have a video I'm actually editing right now that I'm posting next week that talks about this. But I take my settings to the point where the trees will completely disappear and only the like 2 to 4 pound bass will show up in the trees. I then mark those trees, and then I would go out with either forward facing or without forward facing, either way, throw out my waypoints on those trees. I know there's bass in the trees. I throw the wacky rigs or a minnow at those fish, and it's like game over. So that's a good technique for year round, pretty much.
I'm fixing to cut in line on the questions, because one of my questions that I actually wrote down today was about timber, because I fish over at Wedowee in Alabama, and it's not a really well-known lake, but we talk about it on here quite a bit sometimes, and it's got a lot of standing timber in it. And that has been what you just said about turning your graphs down to where you're only seeing the fish. Because I graph them and I'm looking at a forest here. What am I supposed to do with that? I didn't think turning the graphs down enough. And that's just from inexperience when it comes to using certain things, I guess. But that's some pretty good juice right there, scanning timber. I had never thought about doing that. I'm out there trying to go, all right, I know they're there somewhere. And then you turn around, but now I'm going to have to get me a handful of the weights too, I guess, the Neko rig and stuff. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't throw that a whole lot. So that's a really good one. But while we're talking about timber, since we're already there, I'll finish up the rest of my question that I had on that. So we'll kind of change a little bit of directions with it. If you're fishing standing timber, do you still use your electronics to look for the structure the same way you would if you were just going fishing offshore fishing and then fish the timber with it? Or do you look at the timber? Because like at Wedowee, you'll run stretches where you'll be in timber for a mile or two. And I mean, it's, so but I only figured that you would have to use your structure, your maps and things like that to find certain things. And am I correct in saying that?
So it depends. There's a lot to unpack there. So I fish timber year round. Is my favorite way to fish. on my lakes, just because very few people are very good at it. So I have a fish kind of myself. It's one of the few things that like I feel like I still have an advantage over, and I can do it with and without forward facing. I don't need it either way. And I've been doing this for like 15 years. I grew up fishing Lake Washita. I learned to do this with like spoons and jigs on Lake Washita when I was like 14 years old. So this is like an old school technique for me at least. But the idea I've always figured out is, okay, there's going to be a depth of fish are in on any given day. Then it's usually going to be determined by the bait fish or the thermocline. So as we get further in the summer, the thermocline is going to set up, and there's going to be a certain depth that the thermocline is setting up in. And usually you want to be fishing trees in that depth. And most of the time you want to find trees that either top out in that depth or are close to topping out in that depth. So what I'll find is a lot of times I might find the thermoclines in like 20 foot of water. Well, I don't want to be graphing in 20 foot of water because the trees will be 10 feet high and they'll be 10 feet from the surface. So instead I might graph in the middle of the creek channel or graph deeper off a point, and think about the tops of the trees is actually the bottom of the lake. So you can actually offset. This is what I do. This is another sneaky deal. Is you offset your mapping on your fish finder based on the height of the trees in that area. So a lot of times the height of the trees will be relatively consistent, like maybe 20 feet or 30 feet tall. Offset your graph depth on your mapping, and then you basically take 20 feet off of the mapping. And what that does is it says, okay, instead of the bottom being in 20 foot, now it's 0 feet. And the middle of the creek channel is now 20 feet because that's the actual top of the timber. And then you graph in 20 foot of water, but it's actually the top of the timber. It's not the bottom of the lake. And you can go around the entire area. Then you use your 2D sonar settings, find the fish with the 3 to 5 pounders in it, and then go fish those trees.
Man, I know what I'm fixing to start doing. Holy, like I said, that's a brain, you know, I mean, because I get out there and go, well, I know there's timber there. I know there's fish in this creek because I've caught nice ones during, you know, topwater season or whatever. But then I go, I know they've got to be in this timber, but trying to find them has always been that's been my kryptonite for sure. We got any more questions up there? We got some more up the top, I think. CSC fishing, for me, forward facing sonar is more for structure cover finder, not so much for watching the bait as it coming through the column. And that's, you know, a lot of guys do it that way. There's certain lakes I do it that way on. And then he says he aims at the brush, fire out in that location, spot lock, lose the image, but I know it's there, you know, it's in the area. And that's another thing. And that's, you know, with spot lock, that was another thing for me. It's like I've got it on my transducer on the trolling motor. So, I mean, I like my spot lock probably more than I like my forward facing at times. So, I mean, I'm good with it being like that too. Main Girl 207, thanks for stopping by. She's always looking for tips for saltwater friends. She's new to it. So, we don't have much salt water, I don't think, around. but hey, we'll anybody can join us. And then Lee Bo, thanks for not forgetting us 2D sonar guys. Look, I'm gonna be honest with you. When asking Johnny to come on the show, I wasn't even thinking forward facing, because for me it was all about the 2D downs, because that was what I was struggling at. So when I you know sent him the email, I was like, hey, I could care less about the forward facing stuff. I want to know what is in the mind of Johnny when it comes to the 2D down scan, side scan. And so I've got another question for you, since we're talking that. Do you think with the advancement of electronics, is the offshore game still the mystical place that it once was, or it's not?
No, it's
at all, not even at all. It's
not even close. I mean, honestly, like I can tell you, I fish offshore almost exclusively. I go up shallow sometimes, but like, now that I had forward facing on the boat for the past, I think I got it on the boat in 2020, 2021, somewhere in that range. So I've had it on the boat for like 4 or 5 years. Right. And when I started taking it off again to film content without forward facing, because it's just, there's a lot of drama around it and there's this division. So I'm like, I'm going to do both because I know how to do both. I'm comfortable doing both. So when I took it off, I find it so much harder to catch fish offshore on traditional offshore areas without forward-facing sonar. If you have forward-facing sonar, you can go out there, you can take a minnow, you can drop it right in front of their face, dangle it there, and they'll eventually eat it, or a Neko rig or whatever. And you can still catch those fish if you're targeting individual fish and you're really good at like picking out the individual guys. But even those fish are getting harder to catch because there are a lot of guys who are getting really good at that. And a lot of them, that's all they're good at. And that's not a knock or anything. It's just that's what they've found success with, and they've tripled down on that. Maybe they only started fishing a few years ago and they found success with it, and that's what they do. So now it's flipped, because when you think about when guys first got into fishing, you would always just fish the bank. The first thing you learn to do is fish a jig or a spinnerbait or a Texas rig or a wacky worm or whatever. I would say that a lot of the people who are getting into the sport now, especially the younger generation, they're skipping the shallow water stuff and they're just going straight to the offshore game with the forward facing sonar. And it's like, normally for offshore fishing, you started learning when you were like 5 years in your fishing journey, 10 years in your fishing journey, once you felt like you could master the shallow water visible stuff. And so now the pressure offshore is higher. The fish up shallow aren't any easier to catch because they're still the guys fishing shallow. I just find that overall, it's harder to catch fish day in, day out, unless you're doing stuff that's completely off the wall, like the timber stuff that I'm talking about. Even then, though, with guys with forward-facing sonar, there's guys who target those fish now that they would have never been fished for. I had them all to myself 5 years ago. Before forward-facing sonar, nobody, like, there were a few people that were doing it, but very few were doing it. Right. And I could pull up on any tree and I would cast within 30 feet of the tree. It didn't matter where I was, and those fish would come up and destroy my bait. And now I have to work them and work them and work them without forward facing to get them to bite. And that's just because of the pressure. They're just getting targeted. So it's, again, not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just kind of the reality we're in right now.
It is what it is. It's funny you say that, because one of the places I fish in Waddell, it's very prominent traditional offshore. That's how I learned to fish offshore, was going to these. I'd find them on a map and go, hey, that's exactly what he taught, go to these spots and fish it. And I never see anybody on those spots anymore. Like, because they don't, you go out there and you catch a handful of dinks, or you might catch some good ones if you're pulling water or whatnot, but you're not going to go out there and catch your tournament winning bag. Now, I go out there to catch fish. I know that's where I can go to catch a few here and there. Mm-hmm. And I got to show my wife forward facing sonar with the drop shot, and she got to catch her first, watch the fish eat it, just like you're talking about. I dropped it right to it. And she's like, that's amazing, So I think Darian Moss had a question. What's your favorite way to fish the Ozark rig with a worm?
So this is the Ozark rig I got one. I tried to come prepared with all the core stuff at least. So this is the Ozark rig. Basically, it is a replacement for a Texas rig, for those who haven't heard of it before. And the thing about the Ozark rig is you rig it just like a regular Texas rig. I just have this one rigged to some line, but you just Texas rig it. And the thing about the Ozark rig that's interesting is, one, all the weight is under the bait. So it actually comes through cover extremely well. It'll come through cover way better than a pegged or even a free weight Texas rig. And you don't have to buy like weights and hooks. You just buy one package there. But the other thing is that you may have seen this in videos. We've been running a lot of ads and stuff for core, but it will wobble. That bait will wobble back and forth on the fall. Like if you watch it underwater, it's crazy. It actually has this wobbling on the fall. And basically what I do with this is, my favorite way to throw it is just a big worm. We have a lot of sizes. A lot of guys are throwing them on smaller worms, trick worms, things like that. But I throw the Ozark rig mainly in brush piles and in offshore timber, because that's where I fish most of the time. I also drag them on shell beds and things like that. But usually with the Ozark rig, what I'm trying to do is just work that bait up and take advantage of the fact that that worm wobbles on the fall and shimmies on the fall. It's a crazy action. It's super cool. Yeah. And it comes through brush super well. And it's just something different to throw at the fish that I feel like other guys aren't throwing. I mean, how many guys are throwing an old monster on a, quarter ounce peg slip sinker and a 5-aught offset hook? And then how many guys are throwing this? And it's just, again, giving those fish something a little bit different to look at, and it's super effective.
That's awesome. Ken Pruitt's got a question. When do you use the core shimmy rig versus strut head and the hover rig?
So you guys are the ones asking about core, so don't blame me for going.
Oh, hey, look, I told you, it's
I don't want to feel
game.
I don't want it to be like an infomercial, but anyway, so these are different rigs. So this is the shimmy rig. So the shimmy rig is the same concept as the Ozark rig, in the sense that you put a weight underneath the bait and it causes the bait to shimmy or wobble. So it wobbles like this, like side to side as it falls, and it just rocks side to side. And the shimmy rig is basically a drop bait. What happens is those fish will see that bait shimmying as they falls, and then they'll come up out of deeper water. And then before they get up to it, like maybe 5 feet away from it, I just burn it. And when you burn it, this bait actually wobbles a little bit like a lipless crankbait when you reel it. And I just try to keep it away from them, and they crush it. And so sometimes the fish, when they are a little bit more hesitant, I guess, to eat the bait like a minnow, I'll throw the shimmy rig because it draws their attention from further away, and you want to keep the bait away from them. Keep the bait 5-10 feet away from those fish, especially if you're like on Lanier and clear water. And what happens is those fish will track it with that vibration from further, and then it's not getting too close to them. It gets away, and they come up and crush it. And like this rig is juice with forward facing. It's very, very good. The hover rig is a bait that is basically all the weight is inside the plastic. And with the hover rig, the bait, when you work it, rocks side to side like a standard minnow bait. But it's really good when the fish are in 0 to 10 foot of water and they're kind of wanting to pin the bait to the surface of the water. So what I do with the hover rig a lot is I throw it and I just work it within 5 feet of the surface, trying to rock it back and forth and have those fish come up again out of deeper water to come eat it. But it's worked a little bit slower and you can fish it really effectively without forward facing. You can just basically just rock that bait back and forth in the water column. And then like a regular minnow, this is our strut head from Core. So this is our like mid-strolling head. This is obviously your minnow where it rocks side to side. And this is where you can put the bait right in front of the fish's face, get it right in front of them, kind of tease them, play cat and mouse. So it's just different applications. I have all these things rigged up all the time when I'm forward facing fishing, because one day they'll eat the strut head, the regular like jig head. Some days they want the hover rig. Some days they want the shimmy rig. I don't know why, but like some days they just want one or the other. And I'll have all of them tied up, and one of them is going to be the deal that day, and then the next day it might be something completely different.
Have you ever used, Dave? You ever used any of those? Really, I hadn't. I'll be honest with you, I hadn't seen the shimmy one yet. That was the first time I'd seen that one. So that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that one before. That's pretty neat. And you brought up a comment. What did you say? I'm sorry, Tim.
I said that's a pretty neat rig.
Yeah, and you brought up a comment that you said that Lipsticker preaches on Lanier, and he kind of got on to me when I fished with him about keep it away from the fish. I mean, Dave, you fish Lanier, you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's the same on Gunnersville.
Yeah.
He gets too close to it. You got to get away from him.
Right.
Because that minnow's, like Kevin says, they're not down there hanging out.
Yeah.
Somebody's running for his life.
Yep. He's not fixing to get eat going, I'm just going to sit here and jiggle around a little bit. I mean, he would, I think Kevin wanted to hit me in the back of the head. He was like, reel it faster. I'm like, I don't know if I can go any faster reeling this thing anymore, but yes, that makes 100%.
Well, that's kind of the thing with a lot why guys are doing stuff with now glide baits. They're doing stuff with like the really big minnows. Like this is a Bastrix Duratrix 7-inch minnow, a big minnow with a jig head. This is like a 5/0 hook with a strut head. And it's a big minnow. And I think the reason that these fish, the reason guys are throwing the bigger bait, a lot of guys think, okay, bigger bait, bigger fish. But it's not really that, in my opinion. Maybe that's part of it. What I find with these baits is they draw fish from further distances and they'll get their attention from further away. So if you can get that fish to see your bait 7 feet away versus 3 feet away and get interested, they have less of a good look at the bait. And then when you start to move it away, they're more likely to commit versus if that bait gets 3 feet from their face and then they start getting interested. So that all has to do with water clarity, how aggressive the fish are, kind of how much drawing power the bait has. So guys are throwing like the Clutch Boss, like the, Trey McKinney and Justin Hammond, they're throwing these big glide baits. And they're doing that to draw these fish from further distances and work it quickly so that they can get them to commit versus like a smaller glide bait that they have to get closer to their face and they get a better look at it. And so it's just kind of this like judging distance, and it's stuff that we would have never thought about without forward-facing sonar. Like, honestly, it's these fast behaviors that you would never be able to notice and observe. And I've tried to kind of implement it with a rig that I use a lot, which is I feel I'm going to stop talking about Core after this. This is my last Core pitch. I'm sorry, guys. Like, this is,
fair enough. We're going to get into some offshore. Yep.
Yeah. This is like the tush with the spunk shad, but this is like the tush rig. And I designed all these rigs around these concepts, like the forward facing stuff. And so this is like taking advantage of these behaviors. But the tush specifically is designed for getting these fish's attention from a distance without forward-facing sonar. So you can work this bait in the middle of the water column that has more drawing power and like the gliding action, it stays away from them. So it doesn't drop like straight down. It kind of glides forward. So it stays away from those fish longer. And it's just trying to take advantage of all these behaviors and building tackle, building gear that takes advantage of these behaviors, because we've just started to understand them. And so there hasn't been that much innovation that is geared towards those behaviors. We're just taking existing baits and techniques and trying to apply them the best we can. And so that's what we do at Core, is try to take advantage of unique looking baits and actions and stuff, but also taking advantage of these new behaviors that we never knew about before.
Right. So we'll change gears so he don't have to talk about core. I mean, I don't mind it. I don't think anybody minds it. Because I'm learning a pretty good bit. I just know if my wife's still here, she's probably going to be upset when I start, the credit card bill shows I'm got core tackle coming in. So, but I wanted to start a different line of question real quick, and we'll get more towards the offshore stuff. We got a couple of really good questions I want to talk about. That'll kind of feed into that too. First off, and you guys, y'all answer it too, because we all kind of got our own definition. My wife asked me last night, she goes, what is offshore? Because she's not familiar with the term. So how would you define offshore as you see it and how you fish?
Well, for me, first, it's not offshore saltwater fishing. That's like the number one pet peeve people have is to think offshore. And it's just, don't shoot the messenger. That's what people call it for bass fishing. But that's just the way that people call it. But in my opinion, it's anytime you're more than a full cast length away from the bank. That's my definition. You can be fishing offshore in 2 foot of water. You can be fishing offshore in 100 foot of water, but you're just not, your cast is not aimed at the bank. And 90% of fishermen before forward facing sonar would make 100% of their casts at visible cover at the bank. Maybe they would fish some isolated timber or logs or whatever on a flat that they could see. So that would be kind of like one of those weird scenarios, but most of the time it's fishing stuff specifically away from the bank. And most of the time it's stuff you can't see with the naked eye. You have to use some type of fish finder or just like a crankbait or a Carolina rig to find these areas. And that's a lot of times how I actually found a lot of my really good spots on like Lake Dardanelle, where I grew up fishing, is I actually didn't use side imaging or anything like that. I would look at a contour map. A lot of times I was using an actual like hotspots map because I didn't have a like good mapping card in my boat. So I was using like a hotspots map, and I would look for where the channel turns in, and I would crank with a crankbait, figure out where the crankbait kind of starts to dive off. Okay, there's the channel. And I would drop marker buoys, and you would kind of drop like a marker buoy. And then once I got my fish finder on the boat, then you graph with 2D, and all I had was 2D at the time. And you drop your marker buoys down the ledge or drop. Then you fire a Carolina rig, and you drag the Carolina rig until you find shell. And you found a shell bed out there. And if you found a shell bed, you marked it in your mind, and you came back. And at some point throughout the year, it would be loaded and you catch 20 pounds. And then you go find 30 shell beds. You're not side scanning them. You're not doing anything. You're just using marker buoys, 2D sonar, and a Carolina rig. So, yeah.
So y'all got any other input for offshore? What your definition will be for offshore? And I mean, because everybody's got something they think differently about it. So.
No, I agree with him. Drop in mapping. I think that's made one of the biggest difference in offshore fishing as we know it is mapping. I mean, I use that. I mean, I'll look at Gunnersville, for instance, and I can sit there in my garage, pull it up, and drop waypoints. Pop, I'm gonna hit this one, then at least scan them.
Yep.
And that's huge.
Yeah,
is the mapping side of it.
Yeah, I'd rather. You would hurt my feelings if you took away my mapping and side imaging, because I mean, you can just look and find things to go back and mark them and go fish them. Even if you can't see them, you can feel for them.
Well, it took me a minute to, obviously I grew up bank fishing, even from boats, fished in the bank because that's what we did. But, it took me a minute to realize that humps and, saddles but then you got flats that may be 5 foot deep that are still offshore because you're not anywhere near the land you're looking at. So it took me a minute to realize that when I got started back in it, that I could still find, places like that to fish. And it kind of brings me up to the next, Johnny, you kind of touched on it. Hunter fishing. Can you comment on places we used to fish that had mega schools, one after the other? Now bass are not there. And I think it kind of feeds into that offshore thinking, but maybe some forward facing sonar results.
Pressure.
Well, I think that there are mega schools out there that show up every once in a while, but it definitely, I think they get beat on so fast in the sense that like guys find them immediately, and they also find the fish before they become mega schools. So they're finding the smaller schools, and then they're beating up on those fish, and they kind of disperse. And then those fish, like let's say you're going out to like the main edge of a ledge. It's like the main channel ledge where you have a creek channel that intersects with the main river channel, and it's like a perfect TVA ledge. And we'll just use that as an example. In the past, you would have 6 smaller schools of maybe 15 bass that are setting up on intermediate stopping points, a stump row, a little shell bed, a little gravel bar, whatever it is. Then those 6 schools combine into an 80 or 100 fish school. And now you have these mega schools. Well, if all these individual schools are getting beat up on because now everyone's offshore, everyone's trying to do it, they're not grouping up as easily because they're getting, dispersed and messed up. And then a lot of those fish are even getting targeted as like when they're doing fry garters or just on individual stumps, and they're getting kind of just pressured before they even make it to the intermediate spots now because everyone, a lot of guys are forward facing out there. And as many fish as there are that set up in schools, there's just as many, if not way more fish. They're just isolated and roaming and just kind of out there. So the concept of finding schools of fish was really helpful in the past because with the technology we had, you could graph them, you could find them. And when that was kind of new and kind of not that many guys were doing it, it was a very easy way to catch fish. But I don't know the percentages, I can just guess, but maybe 10% of the fish on the lake actually set up in these mega schools on any given fishery at any given time. The rest of the fish are just kind of roaming in smaller wolf packs. They're chasing shad. They're on brim beds. They're doing whatever. And so now you have to kind of find those isolated deals more and figure out where can I pattern a group of a wolf pack of 3 to 5 bass with forward facing, especially if you're in tournaments. Or if you're not in tournaments, how do I find a school of, if you're not using forward facing sonar, but are in tournaments even, if you're not using forward facing, it's like, where are the places that these fish aren't getting messed with? Are there actually places like that? And are there groups of fish on those places? And those areas are getting fewer and fewer and fewer every single day we go on. And like, I still have a couple of sneaky things that I do that are like, no one's really doing it still, where I can still catch fish and, catch them every single cast and catch good ones every cast. But like, it's so small, this like intersection of have active, healthy fish that want to bite, that are schooled up, that aren't getting pressured, that haven't been pressured before they got out there. Like it's getting really, really hard, to be honest.
So it might be more, not so much electronics, but the number of people that are out there fishing. Because you get out there throwing at the same fish and busting those small schools up. That's
disturbing them more.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's obviously the electronics lends to that being happening more effectively. So that's a big thing. And our buddy Alan Brooks, great question. Do you see a difference of aggressiveness between a floater and a fish stuck on the bottom? Which one would you rather throw at?
So it kind of depends day to day and also fishing pressure. When you get a lot of fishing pressure on the lake, the floaters are a lot harder to catch, but they aren't impossible to catch. It also depends if you have striper in your lake. So like on Beaver Lake in Arkansas, where I fish a lot, it's almost impossible to like find a good group of floaters. You can find them every once in a while or find some floaters, but because of all the stripers and like the striped bass, they chase in the higher parts of the water column, and the largemouth just seem to push tighter to the bottom. And so you can find more of the largemouth on the bottom. So the positioning of the bass is different. But if you have like a mix of both of floaters and bottom fish, most of the time the fish on the bottom will be easier to catch because fewer guys are targeting them. And if I was going to fish tournaments right now in my local area, the one thing I would become really proficient at is graphing the bottom of the lake, finding fish with 2D sonar that are stuck to the bottom of the lake, and then targeting them with forward facing. Because a lot of those fish on the dead, right on the bottom of the lake, a lot of times they're in the middle of a creek channel, or like on them, like if there's a bluff wall in the back of a creek, they're right in front of the bluff wall, but on the bottom in 40 foot, glued to the bottom, and you can barely see them. And I've been doing this for like 3 or 4 years now. And it's one of those things I kind of have to myself-ish, not really, but somewhat, because everyone's going through scanning for the floaters, and they're throwing them, they might pick off those fish. But once 16 guys roll through the same creek channel swing with bait and they throw at the floater, it's not going to be as easy to catch, or it's already been caught, or it's been messed with. We don't really know. The only exception is if they're actually actively feeding on bait balls. Sometimes they're easier to catch if they're actively chasing on bait or they're really grouped up. But a lot of times then it's bait choice. Like sometimes the difference between a 3 and a 3.5 inch minnow can make a huge difference, or a thinner bodied minnow to a thicker bodied minnow. That can make all the difference to getting 0 bites and 15 bites from those fish. And that's what a lot of the really good forward facing sonar guys are doing, is they're like, in practice, I want to go out and figure out what exact bait length, width, height, head combination generates the most bites from fish in different zones. And then I'm going to use that bait and have an advantage because I can go through the same creek right behind someone else who's throwing a 4-inch freeloader. And I'm going to be using a 3-inch Japanese insert name here bait that no one else has. And I'm going to go catch them. So that's kind of the idea there. But that was a lot in one answer. Sorry.
So Jorge Pampa Bass Angler asked, could you effectively do offshore kayak fishing with 2D sonar?
I believe so. I think so. If you can move fast enough. That's the one thing is like with any sort of traditional sonar, you have to be moving your boat or your kayak at like 2.5 miles an hour to get a consistently good image. So if you have like a trolling motor or you have really strong legs, like your quads are massive and your calves are massive, you can get the pedal version and just rip it. Maybe you have like lats for days and you can just with the paddle. But I mean, either way, you just have to be moving at a pretty good clip to get a good image.
I don't say that sounds like work right there. I wouldn't want to fish after I'm paddling that hard to get 2D to pull up. But yeah, I mean, with the trolling motor, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm eventually gonna get a kayak just so I can do some kayak stuff, and I'm gonna have a trolling motor on it. I'm not going out there and I don't want to go out there and work myself to death. I can't even fish when I get done. So, in Bottom Line Outdoors, he brought the comment, before I had electronics, I used crankbait football jig to understand offshore game. So yeah, I mean, that's and for me, I had the electronics, but I also my first time going out there and I'm going to fish offshore, I picked up a deep diving crankbait to see, to do it. So I understand
I still have 3 deep diving crankbaits in the deck of my boat all the time. Like any time of the year other than maybe like the middle of the winter when it's like 40-degree water, I'll have 1 crankbait in the deck of the boat versus 3, but I still throw crankbait a lot. I throw a lot of the 30-foot diving crankbaits now. That's what I've been kind of getting into, like the Blitz Magnum EXZR from OSP. It's like a 30-foot diving crankbait, and you can get a crankbait down deeper than what other guys can throw, and it's a bigger crankbait. And that seems to work pretty good for me. And I also weight it. It's scary because it's a $30 crankbait. But you weight it down and then you burn it, and you can get it down to like 40 foot. And instead of long lining, you can, with forward facing, you can count it down and see it down and then burn it, and kind of do like what they were doing at Douglas Lake back in the day with the long lining, but like not have to long line. You can just watch it sink. So,
right. And going back to Alan's question about the more aggressive, I did offshore Saturday, and I used the 25-foot dredger to hit this certain hump, and it was a fish off the bottom shot in the screen. The other fish that were on top of the hump weren't even paying attention. They would follow it, but the one he'd come off screen hammered it. I mean, he was definitely coming from the bottom because I never saw him before that. I'd graphed him. I'd used my graphs and found the fish sitting there, but he didn't show himself the first couple of tosses. So, I mean, I don't know. I think sometimes the bottom ones are more aggressive to me. That's for sure. And then Tim White said he had 1,000 crankbaits. He never throw anymore. I still try to throw the crankbaits. I like doing it. I mean, there's a reason why I own about 4 Black Max reels because of Johnny. I went and bought them. I was like, yep, he's not wrong. I can use them to.
Hey, I got a whole bunch of Black Maxes.
That's what I mean.
You can't
I'm
kill
still
them.
running my Black Maxes. I have 12 of them in my boat right now, and I bought them 5 years ago.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I mean, that's a good investment. $29 at Walmart. I got my milk. I got my Black Maxes. What else do you need? Like literally.
So for those looking for rod and reel combo that you want to get the Black Max, Walmart's now got the Black Max rod reel combo at $77 because where I'm at, the reel is $60 now. So I mean, you can get the reel and a rod for $77 if you're looking.
And those rods are not bad.
Yeah, I mean,
if you're just getting into it, that's a good combo to go.
Not a bad deal. The only thing I found with the Black Max that I finally run into was my anti-reverse went out on one of them. So like you've got a chatterbait or something like that on it, and it's got a little weight to it, and you bounce it, it'll run line off pretty quick. Like I've gone down the lake and looked over my chatterbaits go out the back of the boat, but it's apparently it's something I could fix. I guess I just hadn't done it. I mean, they're $60 at Walmart if I just replace them. Limo at 58. I used to use bucktail jigs with great success on long offshore points, but that bite seems to have went away for me. Is this maybe due to more offshore pressure?
So I still throw a hair jig quite a bit. I find success with them at times. That bait was like insane from 2011 to 2022, I think now with so many guys throwing minnow profile baits, those fish are just less likely to eat that. Like, honestly, I was fishing for so many of the same fish that guys are targeting with forward-facing sonar, but I was just using a hair jig back in the day, bucktail jig. That's what I was doing, and I'm targeting the exact same fish, but I would, again, just mark them with 2D, down, side, throw at waypoints, kind of fan cast the area, and that was my number one bait for years. And I would throw it year round, and it was just really, really good. I used to do on-the-water fishing lessons. I don't do them anymore, but I used to do like electronics trips, guide trips, whatever you want to call them. And I would throw a hair jig with guys. Like, that'd be like 90% of what we threw every time we went, because that was just the deal. That was what we just called them on so much. So, but yeah, I think it's just the profile, the shape of a hair jig. It just looks so much like a minnow. And now, everybody's just throwing minnows. It's the thing. But yeah, it's just, unfortunately, where we're at right now with fishing is that a lot of the techniques are getting really accessible. So it's hard to find a truly like technique to yourself. It's not a bad thing, I guess, because it's made it more accessible, but it's made all of the other techniques less effective. That's why I kind of feel like it's a little bit unfortunate, just because there's not that many like really, really good techniques anymore like there used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. It makes sense. I mean, I'm guilty of it, but I mean, I'm not throwing anything special. So, I mean, I put my stuff on YouTube or TikTok or whatever and show them, hey, this is what I'm catching fish on. And but kind of like you, I want to teach people, maybe somebody that's at my level of fishing, saying, hey, I want to know how he got there, So I show them what I'm throwing, that kind of stuff, but I don't have anything super, super sneaky, I guess. And then Derry Moss says you must have some hellacious forearms to throw a 30-foot diver.
I work out, like I got like the arms, and I work out just to
just to throw a 30-foot.
Just to throw a 30-foot diving crankbait. That's where I'm doing the
that's a workout in itself.
That's what I'm saying.
Push-ups and everything, just to do crankbait fishing.
Well, I know in one of your videos, I can't remember if it was the last one you put out or the one before that, you were talking about you were cranking. You were like, I don't know why it's so hard to talk when I'm cranking. You're like, I got to get back into crankbait mode, doing that. So it's definitely gonna be I know after a few tosses, it's a workout for sure. Oh, yeah. Atlanta Outdoors, I paddle only in my kayak, struggling offshore now, but colder weather is hair jigs, wobble head, and a drop shot mostly for his offshore stuff.
And that hair jig too is kind of situational. Like on Tennessee River is still a staple. I memean, it's in that rotation. I fish with a bunch of guys up there, and at some point you put up on school, somebody's gonna throw a hair jig in there,
right?
Just because they bite it. And I think a lot of it too is the forge that we have up there with the big gizzards. It mimics a big gizzard really, really well,
right?
Because it's a big bait fish.
Now, do you have certain? So I've got a couple of hair jigs, and I've fished. I've actually thrown at Gunnersville a couple of times, but didn't really know what I was doing with it. Is there certain brand hair jigs that you prefer over others? Is there certain makers that maybe some guys don't know about? That
there's a guy up there that's got one they say is the best on the planet. I don't know. The one I throw starts with an S. I think it's pretty available everywhere. Right. It's just, and I throw like a 3/4, 5/8, 3/4, 1 ounce, just get it at the bottom.
I got you.
I don't get anything crazy, but they say they have a really good hair jig maker up there. I have not found him yet, but when I do, it will probably cost me some money.
So how are you fishing hair jig? What is your on Gunnersville? What are you using to target? What are you doing specifically on Gunnersville with the hair jig? Like bouncing it? You
let it go to the bottom and then reel it 4 or 5 times, kill it. And then what it does, it just makes it come off the bottom, and then it just kind of flutters back down. When it hits the bottom, take it off again.
So don't use the rod to do it. Just use a reel, crank it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. See, I don't fish with a hair jig. I mean, ever. Well, when I get offshore, I'll tie one. It'll be tied on, with next to crankbait. As soon as they start biting the crankbait, I get stuck on that, and I don't ever swap over to the.
And
hair
even
jig.
Sometimes because a lot of times you'll pull a school and they'll get high, you can throw the hair jig out there and just reel it.
I got you.
Just reel it through them. Burn it.
So
he was saying the white bass, a lot of times you'll pull out there and you'll get the white bass on top, but the largemouth are on the bottom, and you'll catch 20 white bass, and then you'll catch a 6-pounder. Because it finally got through the white bass, and then the old big girl's down there eating it.
Okay. Well,
that's a big deal right now. I actually fish a lot of white bass schools. The bait I throw is the 8.0 square bill. Someone mentioned in the comments, but 8.0 Magnum square bill, and this is the other one is the Sakamata Shad 8-inch. I put it on the 7/0 1/4-ounce tush from Core, and you can work this thing, and you work it just like a hair jig, basically. but it has a little bit slower fall rate. And I actually only like it halfway through the water column. So I actually try to work it like above the level of the fish by 5 feet, burn it, stop it, burn it, stop it.
Okay.
But 8-inch fluke, 8-inch Sakamata shad, this is the heavyweight version of the Sakamata shad. With that hook, because it glides forward, it draws the fish from the bottom, but the white bass can't eat it. It's too big of a bait. The hook is too big, so they'll hit it, and then the big largemouth will come up and eat it. So like I throw this with the Magnum square bill as my back-to-back baits and like a giant 30-foot diving crankbait, even if I'm only fishing in 15 foot of water sometimes, just because those white bass can't get it. But if you find these giant white bass schools, there might be a handful of big largemouth. And that's a really big thing right now at the professional level, is targeting white bass schools.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, it's about that time. We're going to do we do a mid-show question for our question of the week, question of the night type thing. So we're going to hit our sponsor real quick, Serve IT. Guys, if you're looking for I'll let Tim get over to it. If you're looking for a full service IT company for your business, get with Serve IT. They are great folks to work with. Alan was just in the comments a few minutes ago. They're fishermen like we are. If you need, IT, don't struggle with it yourself. Get with Serve IT and get them, let them see what they can do for you. Also, if you're looking to work in IT, get with Serve IT. Maybe they can find something. Maybe y'all can be a fit. Go down and talk to them. I know Danny's been down at the facility. I haven't been down there. I haven't been there before, but get with them and they can work with you. Maybe figure out something there. Question of the night should be pretty easy. Shouldn't be too hard. Tim, I put a copy back there on your desk as well. I'm gonna read this twice. It should be fairly easy, and it's I'm gonna read it twice. When did Fish the Moment join YouTube? When did Fish the Moment join YouTube? I need month, day, and year. It's very specific. All right, we'll keep going with the questions real quick.
I don't even know that answer. Someone's gonna have to do some research on that one.
They will.
It's pretty simple.
Hey, at least we can verify the answer.
Yeah, we can actually verify
any clarification needed. We got the man here.
All right. So I got a text from Kevin Thornton, who is Father Time. He was in here earlier, and he said, "I got a question for you for question of the night." I said, "Okay, shoot. What is it?" He goes, "Ask him to tell you what your wife's car is, year, make, and model." I was like, "Did I post that somewhere?" He goes, "No, but they can't AI it." I'm like, "Well, yeah, but they got to be able to answer the question." So, if you'll keep an eye on that, Tim, so we can get that. And then Abu is putting reels on ugly sticks too. Pretty good setup. Yep. And then Gary Heath had a question, Johnny. Why did Strike King stop making the 8.0 Magnum square bill? If you may know or may not know.
They do have an elite version. So they do have it still. It's just they redid. They just stopped making like the normal version. I'm just assuming no one's throwing it, which is great because I'll just keep throwing it because I have one tied on literally every single time I go fishing after the water temperatures get above like 60 degrees. It's my favorite. It's like one of my favorite crankbaits of all time. I actually got one of them from one of my fishing partners in high school was Greg Hackney's nephew, and he got one of them from Greg. And it was right after he was like doing well with it, right? I think he was catching him on it, but then he eventually ended up doing well and won a Pickwick tournament on it in like 2012, 2014, somewhere. It had to be like 2011, 2012, somewhere in there. But he did well like a little bit after. But we were looking at it, we're like, this is a massive crankbait. What is this? What did we throw this on? We were throwing like a big flipping stick, and like we had no idea about it. But we took it out the first day on the shell bed on Dardanelle, and I caught like a 5 and a 4 on back-to-back casts on. And I was like, can we get more of these things? And like I was working with Strike King at the time. I was sponsored by them, so they got me more, and I was able to use them. But I've been using that bait for a long time.
And we do have a winner. ATL Outdoors, Atlanta Outdoors, August 15th, 2016. It's in his YouTube bio. So there you go. Make sure, I don't know if Danny's got your information. If not, reach out to Danny Pruitt on Facebook Messenger and send him your information. He will get it mailed out to you once he returns, which, guys, I know he's probably got some stuff to mail out. I think he's back, next week sometime from Puerto Rico?
I think so.
He's down there in Puerto Rico.
He's fishing on location for some of the other projects.
So he's out doing that, enjoying the high life, fishing for peacock bass, which is one of my dream, trips to go on. So good job, man. Our hunter fishing around here, we fish cane piles and such. We see that bass on forward-facing sonar, and sometimes we get a lot of followers but no takers. Heavy wind. What would you do to get them to bite? Heavy wind.
If you have forward facing sonar, I would just pull up to a cane pile. If you see herring around, then I would fish the pile. If I don't see herring around, I'm going to the next cane pile, most likely. Because if you can find a pile that has herring around it on the forward facing, those bass are going to actually get up and get active, and then you can actually catch them. I know from like the few times I've fished lakes with herring and cane piles, the fish, we used to just like graph for like hundreds of cane piles in practice, and then you just rotate them, and you'd make 5 casts on a cane pile and move on. And the idea was that you wanted to find an active pile, and we had to guess which piles were active or not, because you didn't really want to graph over the top of them beforehand. You could kind of do it, but it was kind of didn't always work out great. So you could basically just run these piles, and that's why guys would run like 100 cane piles a day until they found an active one. Well, now if you can find an area that has the gizzards in or the herring in it in that day, you just run those active cane piles. And you really, what I would do is look for the fish not actually in the cane pile, but actually on the outer edges. Like maybe if you wanted to put like a radius around the cane pile, like go maybe 50 to 100 feet on either side of that cane pile, look around it, look for fish that might be off on the bottom, on the sides, and that might be actually trying to chase on the bait fish in the area. Because if you have those bait fish there, they're way easier to catch than just trying to like sit there and force them to bite. I've tried to force them to bite. Maybe that wacky rig thing I talked about at the beginning where you dead stick a bait for 3 minutes in the middle of a pile on that wacky rig with the wacky shot, maybe that could get him to bite. It's a very painful way to fish though. And honestly, I think you're probably better off just hunting an active pile versus trying to force feed those fish.
All right. So we talked about brush piles Tuesday. That was our show thing Tuesday was brush piles. So we'll just kind of direct it towards this. And like, I know you guys fish Lanier way more than I do. And I know Johnny's probably got a lot of juice for Lanier type water. So we'll go with that direction. Somebody going to Lanier, let's say this weekend, offshore fishing, how should they approach it? And any juice that you might give them? Because I've got your offshore guide. I've looked it over. I've read, so for me, the big thing about fishing new water was finding where to go in the lake and how to approach it. And tell the folks, anything you can give them that would, and Dave, I want you to chime in on it because y'all fished it a lot more than I have. So on Lanier, going this weekend, how to fish, how to find that offshore game and maximize their time on the water. Like if I drove from Carrollton out to here, I got 2-hour drive each way. How am I going to maximize my time on Lanier?
So it kind of depends if you have forward facing or not. So I'll just do both because that's a completely different strategy either way. So if I was going out to Lanier without forward facing, what I would try to be doing is graphing timber with 2D sonar. And I have a video coming out on my channel it'll be probably come out next Friday. I was trying to get it out for tomorrow, but I didn't make it in time. But next Friday, I'm going to be doing a video explaining how to break down timber with 2D sonar. So go subscribe to Fish the Moment YouTube channel if you want to see that video. But anyways, so I would be graphing the timber on the edges of points that are touching the main river channel. So find the main river channel, find a point that dumps out in the main river channel. And a lot of times these fish are going to be setting up in the timber, not on top of the point. So if you have a point that's like this, I guess this is a terrible example, but like this is the main channel, this is the top of the point. You want to find timber that's like off the side of the point and is kind of like parallel with the edge of the creek channel. And if you can find any bait or anything out there, then that's even more ideal because those fish are actually going to be positioned in a way where they're going to be stationary and catchable. Fish that are up on top of the point or maybe even around brush, they're going to be roaming around so much that they're a little bit harder to catch compared to the fish that are sitting on the edge of a channel in timber. Those fish are kind of in their resting mode and they're not as picked on as other fish are a lot of times because guys aren't looking in the timber super carefully. So I would then go out and I would throw a few different baits. I would throw some type of swim bait, reeling a swim bait down there. If you can find like a weedless swim bait head, that's ideal. A lot of times you can find even like there's like a jig. If you find like a really good jig with a light weed guard, and then you can put a swim bait on that. That's a great way to do it. You can also put on like a minnow style bait, even like this, just what a guy's been throwing, and find a weedless head, drop it down there, and you have to count it down the depth that the fish are in. And then you can work that bait, either reel the swim bait through them, shake your rod with the minnow, and that will work. And if the timber is really shallow that you find the fish in, let's say it's 15 feet or less of water, you can also just throw a swim bait or like the hover rig, a top water, a wake bait. If you have really clear water on Lanier, I don't know what the water clarity is at right now, but if you have like 4+ feet of visibility, those fish will come up out of that timber and come eat a top water off of the surface, like from 15 foot of water, they'll come up to the surface. So that's what I would be doing if I was out there, maybe running some piles. If you have some good brush piles that may have some fish in them, doing that cane pile, just rotating them, or just regular brush piles. So that would be what I would do if I was fishing offshore without forward facing. With forward facing, I have two kind of things that I'd be doing, but honestly, what I would be doing if I had to catch a tournament bag out there right now is I'd be throwing an 8-inch flutter spoon or a 7-inch minnow. And probably the 8-inch flutter spoon is what I'd be throwing more. And what the 8-inch flutter spoon does is it draws those fish from a distance. And so if you can get around a piece of timber or a piece of brush, what'll happen a lot of times is that these fish will be setting up in these brush piles or in a piece of cover. And what you'll do is you actually pull the fish out with the flutter spoon. So you have like a brush pile. And if you have a brush pile out there, throw the flutter spoon not in the middle of the brush pile because it has big hooks, but you actually work on the edge of the brush pile with forward facing. And these fish will be sitting right at the base of the brush pile. The brush pile is all here and they'll be in the middle of it. And it'll draw these fish out and you'll see them swim out from the pile. And this isn't just working like Lanier. This will work anywhere you have deeper, clear water right now. But it'll pull those fish out of the pile and they'll actually either come out of the pile and then come eat your flutter spoon. Or if they don't, you've drawn them out now. Then you go with a drop shot, a Neko rig, a wacky worm, and you pick those fish off. But you pull them out of the pile first with the flutter spoon. If they eat the flutter spoon, you're going to have a mega bag on the flutter spoon. It'll be really fun. If they don't eat the flutter spoon, then you can, again, catch those fish with the finessier baits, kind of pulling them out of the piles. And then obviously if there's like floaters and just fish around, you can pick those off with a minnow and stuff just to kind of, fill out your limit. But that's kind of the way I would be thinking about trying to win a tournament. You're not going to get maybe a ton of bites doing it, but you can catch some really big ones.
That makes perfect sense. Dave, what is your approach going to Lanier this weekend? What's your approach to the offshore? How do you go about it? I know you fish there more. So
yeah. If you don't have piles marked, I usually set on my C-map, I set it up to where anything between 15 and 30 foot is a very predominant color. And I'm going to idle and find brush until I find enough. And I'm going to come back because I have forward and I'm going to look at it. And I'm going to check every one of those piles. Now I've got 300 or 400 brush piles on Lanier marked. And I'll run pile to pile to pile. Like you said, if the fish are sitting over the top, and Lanier is really clear, those fish will come out of 30 foot of water and eat a bait. So my go-to is chrome top water, clear top water, and a Zoom Super Fluke. If they're in the pile, I will throw a shaky head in the middle of that pile and sit there and just shake it. And shake it, like he said, it might take a minute. 2 minutes, and all of a sudden it'll swim out of the pile. But that's the way I fish for top water stuff. And like I said, I do throw a spoon.
Yeah.
If I get them, but a lot of times the ones I'm looking for are sitting about 2 feet above a pile. If they're sitting above that pile, most of the time they'll at least come up and look at it.
Right.
And chrome, everybody knows right here, you throw a chrome.
Right.
I've had more success on clear. And I'm moving it stupid fast because we got herring, and I just don't think they get a good look at it.
I saw somebody ask a question the other day. I don't remember where it was at that I saw the question. Do you think the clear ones are just BS from people? No. And so I knew it wasn't out here. I don't remember where I saw that question, but somebody actually asked. They thought that it was
they just don't get a good look at it.
Right.
I've been throwing a clear spook for 20 years. Like that's my favorite color is a clear one.
Sexy dog. Gunfish, something like that. I usually put a feather on the tail, on the back hook. But like I said, just something to keep, and you burn it. I mean, it's crazy.
Right. So, David, follow up with your question or your statement there about that. You said you go find brush pile. Now, this is some of this stuff for me learning too, because I'm bad. I'm that guy that goes out there with my rods. I'm at the marina pulling the rods out, and I'm going out there and find the first spot. I see fish, I stop my fish. So, do you go scan like, let's say an hour? You're going to scan for straight hour. You're going to go mark that one. You're not going to stop and fish it because you saw a fish on it. You're not going to turn around and double check it. You're just going to keep going.
I'm going to scan for 2 or 3 hours.
Right.
Because the next 30 minutes is what I'm looking for. Another thing is too, I run my side scan out to about 100 feet. I normally scan at about 80, but I'll run it out there because we have on Lanier, they may have cane. Most of it is actual brush piles, wood. And you can see those piles out there. And I'll just go down through there at 3 or 4 miles an hour and pop and just mark them, and then I'll come back, give them a minute, and then like I said, let them, because a lot of times you go over, the water's super clear, they get spooky, they need to be set up right. I was talking to a guy today, and he's a co-angler, and he's like, what do you do when you're topwater fishing? I said, the first thing you do is you don't throw it over somebody's shoulder. I said, because as soon as something lands, those fish react to it. I said, if you'll let that, and he's fishing with me, and we throw it, I said, when I throw it in there and one locks it up, I'm gonna turn the boat sideways. You get right in there behind me. But like I said, if those fish are set up right, a lot of times they lead. But if something boogers them up, then you honestly, you're better off just leaving and coming back.
Right.
They're there. They're not going anywhere. But give it an hour. Give it 2 hours.
Right.
And come back. Let them set back up, and then you catch your couple.
I got that whole mentality like deer hunters. If I don't shoot the first one that walks through there, the guy behind me is going to shoot it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's why I look at it with fishing, because I'm like, well, I know 42 boats just took off in front of me, and I'm talking about fun fishing versus the tournament guys or whatever. I'm like, well, if I don't go over and fish it, there's going to be 42 boats that are going to come run through it and tear it up, and I won't get the, whatever. Yeah. So I'm guilty of, and my wife, if she's still in here, will tell y'all, I've said that there's been days I'm like, I'm going to scan, and I'll go scan, but like I said, maybe about 30 minutes and then I'm fishing. I use
COVID. That's what we did. Yeah, my buddy of mine during COVID, because I'm not from here. The bath water at my house isn't this clear. And I told myself, I don't know how to do this. Right. I have no idea. But I said, if I find enough brush piles, I feel like I can throw a jig, a drop shot, a shaky head in a brush pile and can compete.
Right.
So we literally took COVID, my old tournament partner and I did, and we scanned for months. And we would stop and we'd find 40 brush piles, we'd fish 4. And then we'd go home and go next weekend, we'd scan 2 more days. And that's how I got them. And now I just have a milk run. I'll hit 100 brush piles in a day.
Right. Tim, how would you attack going to Lanier or any other lake that you would go to fish offshore? And how are you going? So you're going this weekend, Saturday, you're going to get up and go. You want to go catch some fish, but you also want to go out there and actually fish offshore and be productive. How are you approaching it?
Talking about brush piles?
It doesn't matter. Whichever one you want.
I'm going to try to lure them out if they're stuck in it.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to do the same thing Dave does. If I can't get them to chase a bait, I'm going to go back in there and throw a worm in it and just dangle it around in there and try to get one of them to eat it.
Are you scanning as much as like Dave? And
Yeah. I love side scanning, finding stuff, and then turn around and take a better look at it. It's like you can cover so much water cruising with that side scan and marking stuff, and then turn around, maybe make another grid.
I want to get on a boat with somebody.
Then come back and take a closer look at it, and then you can be like, oh, it's nothing to it.
Yeah.
But if those fish are totally inactive or they're not paying any attention, I mean, move on, or all you're doing is wasting your time.
And don't get me wrong, I side scan every time I go out. I set up my side scan, so I'm not completely ignorant when it comes to it. But I don't feel like I'm as in tune to it. 9-inch screen, I only got one on the back. I'm not running 24 inches of screen on the console myself. But it's like ledge fishing. Another topic I want to learn that I just don't get the opportunity to do it. So that's thought I'd ask that question, but. Jonny, I know the answer you're going to give. How much time do you spend behind the wheel versus fishing on any given day, scanning versus fishing?
So I have a different way of going about fishing, just because from a content standpoint, I like to show how I find fish without having a bunch of spots found. So this might probably freak people out, but I delete all of my waypoints on my graph every single month. So I just go in and just delete everything. I delete them all. So
Dave just passed out. We got to give CPR. Hang on.
Okay, Dave. So because my goal isn't to tournament fish necessarily. So I don't want to have a bunch of brush piles and stuff on there, because then it's like, oh, how do you know I found that? Like a lot of times I'll just go to new parts of the lake, and sometimes I'll refish an area. I'm like, okay, I haven't been here for a year, and I go to different parts of the lake, different lakes. I just go around. I like to kind of just, I also like to find new stuff. That's what's fun for me in fishing, is finding the fish, not saying like, okay, I've caught them in this brush pile before, I'm going to go back there. So I hardly ever do that. But because of that, I spend a lot of time graphing, especially when I'm doing my non-forward facing days. I would say I'm probably graphing, but I'm weird too about it, because I graph, and I'll graph for like probably 5 of my 8 hours most of the time. And the reason I'm doing it is because I'm actually using my 2D sonar down scan, side scan to identify not only are there fish in the area, but the size of the fish. So I can tell you when I pull up on the spot, am I going to catch a 1 pounder, a 2 pounder, a 4 pounder, or a 6 pounder? And what I try to do is graph as much as I can until I feel like I can catch a 4 to 6 pounder. And then sometimes I graph through those areas. I find a few, I can't get them to bite because of, whatever. I can't figure out the right bait, or it's not the right conditions or whatever. Then I'll go back to the areas where I know I had like 1 pounders, and I have all my waypoints kind of categorized in there, where like, I know this is a 1 pounder, 3 pounder, 5 pounder. I kind of mark the areas to kind of remind myself. And then I'll just kind of go through the pecking order of fish the spots with the biggest fish. And sometimes if I find a spot with like a 5 pounder group or a 3 pounder group, I'll just immediately turn around and start fishing it, because I know they're quality enough fish for my videos. I hardly ever stop on spots where I have 1 pounders, unless it's this time of year where the fish haven't fully pulled offshore yet. I'm trying to instruct and make a video, and I know I'm not going to find a big group of big ones. So I'll stop on a school of 12 inches, just because it's better to catch something than not make a video. So that's my logic, though. When I'm doing forward facing, though, it's completely different, where all I'm trying to do is get in an area that has bait 90% of the time. Or if it's not bait, I want to find fry balls, or I want to find brim beds. I want to find some type of forage the fish are feeding on. And I'm basically just going to drop the forward facing, maybe mark a few brush piles and like a few things. But most of the time it's just following the mapping and just going on the forward facing and just trying to find areas that have forage in the area and then picking off those fish. And it's just it's a completely different sport, or like a different activity for me when I do my forward facing versus non-forward facing days. Like the way I fish, the baits I use, the gear I have, I change all my rods out from my forward facing to my non-forward facing days. I completely change all my rods out. I completely change my mentality. I put a butt seat in every time I go with my forward facing days, because I know I'm just going to be on the butt seat scanning around. And like, I don't enjoy doing that really, honestly, as much as the traditional non-forward facing stuff. I like the non-forward facing stuff a lot more. But I also want to teach everything. So I do both, but hopefully that makes sense. It's kind of a long-winded answer, though.
Well, you just answered my next question too, which one you preferred. I mean, I think that, I think a lot of people watching the content saw, you fishing forward facing, saw you fish traditional. And I'm sure you may have answered in the comments before, but I don't read a whole lot of YouTube comments, just because you never know what you're going to get in there. But you answered you like the traditional a lot better than you like fishing the forward facing. And I can understand that. I mean, even though I use them kind of combined together because I was learning it, I mean, it makes a lot of sense that would be that.
Well, to kind of give you a further on that, like the reason I think it's, when I first got forward facing, and I don't want to go too down this rabbit hole, but like when I first got it, there was a commentary that talked about how they were just using it to find structure and cover. And that's what I was doing at the beginning. I would still mark the brush piles, and I would still do all these things. And like, I would just pull up, okay, I know there's some fish around the area. I can get my cast dialed in. And I was like, this is cool. And like, it's helping me be more efficient. But then as I got better at forward facing and I started seeing what the guys at the top level are doing, that's not what they're doing. They are hunting individual fish. They know the size of the fish. They know the behavior of the fish. They're trying to read the behavior of the fish. They're trying to find a zone of the lake, gridding it out to say, this part of the lake has this many 4-pound fish. They're this likely to eat because this water clarity and this wind blowing in this area. I know the exact bait I need to throw. And they're dialing it in this little zone to say, I have this grid that's maybe a football field size grid where this is my highest chance of getting. If I throw it 20 dots, I'm going to get 3 of them to bite if I have this bait on, and they're going to be an average size of this. And they're dialing it down to that level. And it's fascinating from a kind of strategy standpoint that you can do that, but I don't find that as like fishing. Like that to me isn't fishing. And so the guys who are really, really good at this stuff, they're getting to that level and it's becoming a completely different sport. And the way I kind of explain it, and this is maybe a bad analogy, but this is what I use. It's like putt and golf. So if you have a golfer, a professional golfer, let's just say, Jordan Spieth is a great putter, but he also can do everything else. He has to drive the golf ball. He has to be able to hit his irons. He has to do all these things to get to the green. I don't know if Jordan Spieth is relevant anymore in golfing, but I watched golf years ago. And then let's say that one day there was a golf ball that came out and they said, okay, this golf ball will allow the pros to hit the ball in the middle of the fairway and on the green every single time. The only limitation from this golf ball is that it can't get within 15 feet of the pin, but every single pro golfer can get within 15 feet of the pin. So now all you have to know how to do as a professional golfer is putt from 15 feet. Now, there's still a lot of nuance putting from 15 feet. You have to read the grain, the slope, the type of grass, the type of putter you have, the golf ball, the roll, practice your putting form. Where do you put the golf ball on the green? Do you want to putt uphill, downhill, side hill, all these things? You can choose where you want to put it. There's still a lot of nuance. But you might be able to take a 12-year-old putt-putt champion and have them be really good at putt-putt and compete with some of the professional golfers who maybe aren't as good at putting, but they're still pretty good. But this 12-year-old professional putt-putt, because all they have to do is learn how to putt, they can do that. But if you take that putter and say, okay, can you hit a 200-yard fairway bunker shot uphill into the wind on a green that's the size of my pickup truck? No, they can't do that, but these other pros can. And you take away all those other skills. So then it's narrowing it down into a space where you can focus on just putting and be a professional golfer versus having to know the whole skill set. And I don't know if that's the exact analogy of forward facing, but as it gets more and closer to guys perfecting it, it feels like it's getting closer there. I don't know if it's there yet, but that analogy is kind of what I'm worried about it getting to, where it's literally just such a small sandbox to play in. And the thing I love about fishing is I can do everything. Everything is viable. I could go offshore, throw a crankbait and a flutter spoon and a hair jig and get my butt beat by a guy throwing a buzzbait and a frog down the bank. And there's just as likely for that to happen as me to catch him, and like so on and so forth. So that was a big rant, but that was just, I'll talk about it. But
that was actually pretty good analogy. I thought
absolutely
that was like perfect for
absolutely
what forward face. I mean, and again, I like forward face. I've got it on my boat. I use it. There's times I don't use it, but you're 100% right. I mean, I use not the excuse, but the argument with people when we get in the forward facing debates, wherever, like, I didn't fish for 20 years. I didn't grow up with a dad that really took us fishing a lot and didn't have boat, that kind of stuff. So when I got a boat, I'm having to learn what you guys know. Like, I'm having to go find the brush piles. I'm having to go read the fish, understand all that. So you're right. It took me from being, here it narrowed it down to a spot that big, and it helped me, get more comfortable with it. But I've also noticed over the last couple of years, I enjoy going out and not turning it on from time to time and just fishing. But at the same time, I'm not so, blind to say that if I go fish a tournament, I'm not turning it on. So that makes sense.
The other part of it is that fishing is really a marketing engine at the end of the day, and people want to watch it and things like that. And I think that people want to probably watch the Masters and the US Open and watch guys hit, Phil Mickelson hit a shot around a tree, or Tiger Woods hitting a fairway shot behind a tree, all this stuff. That's way more exciting than watching, the US National Putt-Putt Championship. How much sponsorship are you going to get for the US National Putt-Putt Championship? And it's like, and again, it's not the perfect analogy. I'm not saying that. And I'm not like, I guess I'm not anti-forward facing in the sense of, I think that if you're really good at it and you understand it, there's so much nuance. It's really like, there's a lot to learn. It's just from the sport that I grew up doing. Is it the same sport? I don't really know. Should it be in the same sport category? I don't really know. It's hard to know. We're in this weird gray zone. It's tough for me as a content creator because I want to make content on both, but there's a lot of guys who don't want to watch forward facing, and they'll just click off my video. And I can see in my videos in the first 30 seconds, if they see forward facing, they click away. And then the YouTube algorithm says this video is garbage because these people clicked away. And maybe the video is awesome. I spent 30 hours editing it. I caught 25 pounds of fish on a glide bait offshore on this lake. And it's a cool technique. But when half the people say, I don't want to watch that, from a YouTube standpoint, it destroys my video versus doing the traditional. But then some guys now are like, I don't even want to learn about 2D sonar. I just want to scope, because why would I ever turn my 2D on when I can just go scope? And so now it's like, it's a weird time we're in right now, man. It's really
But
weird.
Do you think though, I mean, obviously we've all seen the argument going, we're going to start seeing the fish change because of what they're doing with the forward face, and that where the 2D and the down scan, the side scan are going to become more relevant. I mean, I saw something the other day. The guys were talking about typical areas where fish set up, the old, high percentage area. We always hear that term. And they were literally going 50 yards down further onto a do nothing bank. And that's where the fish were at now, that you never would have saw that fish there unless you used a side scan or, if you went down, but the guys aren't going to go down that bank with the forward facing. You're just not going to do that.
I mean, 25 years ago, if you stayed on the bank, you got your head caved in.
Right.
They left the bank for a reason. Now they come out here, and now we found them here at their normal haunts that they lived in for 15 years, and they didn't get beat on until somebody could triangulate. Kevin Van Dam gets mapping. Now he knows where he can find all this stuff. So after a while, and you get your head caved in there, you can go somewhere else.
Right.
The
you might have
fish
to
are
go
just
far.
They're moving because of us, just the pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've turned up the heat.
Everybody's hitting this one spot where they've took up residency, so they're just going to shift away from it.
And they're still great community holes. I mean, look at the tournament that Wheeler won on Gunnersville, the MLF. I was out there, and it's amazing to see this. I mean, he's catching one here off this school, one off this school, one off this school. He pulled up on the biggest community hole in Gunnersville and smashed 27, 29 pounds. I mean, it's almost got a stop sign on it. I mean, it's right next to the main bridge. It's where the channel comes in and does this. And he pulled up on it when the wind got to blow it. It created a little more current than they had. They cut the current on that afternoon. And those fish that were out there went, boop. They pulled up on that spot. And guess who pulled it right behind them? He did. Yeah. And he caved their heads in for about 45 minutes. They still get there, but like I said, they might not be there when they should be there. They're just not going to go sit out there and just get beat on.
Well, it's kind of like the mega school thing that Johnny brought up earlier with, they never get a chance to build a mega school. Right. Same way with your community holes or your hot spots. I mean, I've got spots that I fish that I can tell the difference, because if you go out there and beat on them day in and day out, they're not going to come back. They're going to come back. You just might not be there when they do.
Right.
And the next guy may, whether it's, you, me, whatever. Like you said, they're still coming back to those spots. They're just not, the 15 boats that just went through there and did the same thing you did.
Yeah.
2 hours from now, they may come back to it. But yeah,
that's
I think
the way my Allatoona trip last Saturday went. It's like everybody was changing hole to hole. But if you could catch a spot that somebody had left alone for a little while, we were picking up fish. But trying to move from spot to spot, they were just disturbed.
Right.
They were there, but
that's like last Sunday. I was out there on Gunnersville, and I could see that spot from where I was, and there were boats all around me graphing all the normal stuff. The mega school was in 3 foot of water. I mean, I told them I caught them every other cast for almost 3 hours. But they were all sitting they were on a high spot, but they were on top of it, and everybody was going around me. But thing when they'd get up there, I just dropped a worm in the water, looked like I'm working it, and they put around me, and they'd leave. I'd fire it out there and catch another one, And I see a boat coming, I drop it downside the boat, look like I'm working it, and we did that for 3 hours. Like I said, they weren't on the normal stuff, because normally they were 50 yards right out there. No. I'll bet you I watched 20 boats go over that place. And they were sitting 50 yards this way.
And that's been happening too for years. Like I won a college regional championship on a spot where there was a ledge, and it was I caught him the weekend before in a tournament, and like it was right in front of the boat ramp. And so it got fished by 75 guys that next week. And like a Thursday nighter got one there and everything. And I was going the next week for a college tournament, and I basically just graphed around the day before, and I was like, where else could these fish go? And I found one little shell bed way up on top of the thing where the fish weren't getting pressured. And there were 2 boats that started on the drop that I started on, and no one had been fishing there until I caught them there the week before, but they cracked them there. And then I was like 25 yards down the ledge on this other little shell bed, and I caught like 16, 17 pounds off of it, and then a few other fish off other spots, and I won the tournament. But it's finding those kind of out of the way things, and that's what I'm doing now. To your point, like with the ledges on Gunnersville, is like fishing shallower or fishing way deeper, and that's kind of the thing. Unfortunately, with even the instruction I give on YouTube, I give away a lot of information, and as a result, people know how to graph a regular ledge or like regular point. And so now you have to figure out where the fish have moved to. And I think a lot of it is now, what can't you see with your electronics very easily? And if you can't see the fish there, if you can't see the spot super easy on the electronics, whether it's with forward facing or with whatever, those are the spots I am more likely to actually target nowadays at times. If there's other things in the area that give me an idea that there might be something up there. And I took one of my buddies out the other day to Grand Lake, and we pulled up on the spot and we side scanned it. And I was like, oh, there's probably fish up there. And he's like, what are you looking at? And I'm like, he's like, your screen is black right there. And I'm like, the fish are right here. He's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, they're right here. And I'm going to make some videos about that this summer. But he's like, I don't know what you're even looking at. And we pull up there, and 3 casts in a row, we catch one. And it was like 1.5 feet of water out in the middle of the lake. And like, I could just tell there were going to be fish there. And it's just figuring out those types of things. And it's, once that gets out, then you have to find the next thing. And it's always find the next thing, which for me is exciting because it keeps me on my toes. It gives me something new to try and new to figure out. So I think it's great for me personally, because it keeps me on my toes. But I've been doing this for a long time too. So it's always good to do something different.
So what, being that you do it, you've been on this for a long time. I mean, you teach a lot of stuff. And I knew you kind of just gave a little bit of an example, but what are we starting to see? What are we starting to need to look for? And I don't mean to be like super specific or nothing like any spots on your lake or anything like that, but what nuances are you seeing? Because I mean, a person just commented, one of the guys said something about the lake, like loving your lake breakdowns. I'll get it out in a second. And I wanted to go into that here in a minute anyway, but what nuances are like, because I go out, I mean, I'm new to it after, 20 years not fish. I'm like, okay, humps, points, ditches, drains, that kind of stuff. And it's very basic. And obviously I get to those spots and I may find a few fish, but I'm not finding the thing. What do I need to start looking for? What specific things, or what, open my eyes, I guess, open other folks' eyes of what they need to start looking for when they're looking at these fish nowadays.
So kind of the way I've been going about it, and I've been doing this for several years now to this point, but like in the early 2000s, like at 2000, even before forward facing sonar, I started by just graphing like the flattest, most boring stretches of the lake. This places no one was going to fish, and you find isolated pieces of cover. And this is like the Brian Thrift approach when he had like 75 limits in a row on the FLW tour. He was just finding isolated pieces of cover on flats, using 360 imaging to cast at them and catch those fish. That was kind of his deal. And I was doing the same thing, and it worked really well. Now those fish are still kind of getting targeted if they're deep enough to see on forward-facing sonar now. So they're getting more pressure than they used to. But still kind of graphing just boring flats is effective, though you're not getting a lot of bites. You're fishing for like 2 to 5 bites a day if you do it day of, like graph, find the stuff, fish it without forward-facing especially. It's not a bunch of bites deal, but if you have enough time to practice where you could do 3 days of idling and find enough of that stuff, you're good. But really flat, boring water was kind of the idea. Now it's going way deeper than anyone is expecting to go and finding fish on the bottom way deeper than guys are thinking. So like on Beaver Lake in Arkansas, I'm catching fish off the bottom in 60 feet of water on like with mud on their bottom in January. And guys are not doing that. They're not fishing in 60 foot of water on the bottom. It's just not, this is something that people won't do, but that's something that I've found, and I've actually found fish doing that. And I kind of know what to look for in those situations. I'm not going to give it all up here because I'm going to save some of that for seminars and other stuff that I do. But, I do I try to keep some of the really, really good for some of like my paid seminars and stuff, just because I I spent a lot of time learning these strategies. So
we'll take just the kitty size juice. That's all. We don't have to have the whole bottle. We just take anything.
That's what I call the sugar-free juice.
The sugar-free juice. We'll take some sugar-free juice.
Well, I just posted a seminar, actually. It's on my website, fishmoment.com. It's called Dominate Without Live Sonar. And it's my strategy for the shallower water stuff, kind of like we were talking about earlier, like on Guntersville, those really shallow bars and things like that. And I did a whole seminar explaining how to tackle those. So if you guys want to check that out, you can go to fishmoment.com. My virtual seminars are all there, like with recordings and all the slides and everything I do is Dominate Without Live Sonar. And that's kind of the shallower end, but basically it's going really shallow and you have to really know what to look for. You have to find the key signs of why the fish are there. A lot of times it's forage related. Sometimes it's wind related. Sometimes it's current related. It depends year to year, like time of year, and it changes every single time of the year. So these strategies, like I'm catching fish on beaver in 3 foot of water or 2 foot of water in January, 40-degree water temperatures, and in 60 feet of water on the bottom in these extremes. And I'm catching good quality fish doing it, really good quality fish. And they're easy to catch. And I don't have to worry about my bait selection nearly as much. I can just throw normal stuff. And that's what I really like, because I don't have to have like 30 rods in the deck. I can have 4 rods in the deck. And I know that as long as I just get a bait around those fish, they're probably going to eat it, versus the other fish where you have to like really make them bite. So that's kind of the idea there.
Okay. Georgia Country Boy TV's got a question here. And make sure you go follow Johnny at Fish the Moment on all platforms. So he's on pretty much everything, I think, But anyway, Georgia Country Boy. So what rig does he use in deep fishing? I've been trying it in timber on Lake Russell, and I end up getting hung or losing the fish.
So there's some handmade stuff that or like homemade stuff. I thought about coming out with some stuff for core with it, but I know it won't sell very well because there's not like a market for it really. But I'm using like 3/4 ounce and 1 ounce jig heads a lot of times with minnows for the really, really deep fish. Honestly, that's what I throw most of the time. I used to have flutter spoons and stuff like that, but it's like a 3/4 ounce or 1 ounce jig head. And a lot of times I'll get them with a little cable guard that is in there so it doesn't get hung up as bad. It's like a single cable guard with a really heavy head. And honestly, you're just cannonballing that thing down to the bottom with forward facing. And then if you don't have forward facing, I will kind of sometimes use a jigging spoon to get down there. Other times I will just still use the minnow, because if I can just cast at my waypoint and get the minnow down there and just kind of hop it around, they're going to eat it. Like it's not super complicated when you get around these fish, because they're just not picked on by anybody. So.
And basically, we're still seeing the same mannerisms of the fish. They're just deeper. I mean, so the way you were catching them a little bit shallower, you're doing it still just as deep. And Georgia Country Boy, I can understand, because I picked up the jigging spoon this year for the first time really ever. And my first couple of casts on Lanier, I hung into some big ones and broke off, and then finally caught the first one. But then it was and it was after a Bill Payne episode. I don't know if y'all remember that one where he talked about tying the feathered treble up to the That one got me. That one cost me some money, because I worked that a lot. But
and on the hangout part, one thing I can recommend is you want to get a really stout rod, and you want to use a heavy weight with a short leader. So I use like a 2-foot leader with my braid. So I'll do like 8-pound braid to like a 12-pound fluorocarbon leader, and I'll do it like 2 foot, really short. And then you put the bait, and then I use a 7/6 walleye rod, medium power. And when those fish get it, I just set up and just reel as fast as I possibly can, just grind them up out of there. And the only issue with that is that you're going to have to fizz like 99% of the fish that you catch. So if you have a fizz needle or something to balance the fish out, what I do when I catch those fish is I literally catch them. I pull them up out of the bottom of those trees. Then I let them go back down to 30 feet when I'm just fishing for fun and like not filming or anything. And I just let them swim around there for like a minute and just let kind of them acclimate at the 30 foot. And I bring them up to like 15 foot and just kind of wait. And then I'll throw them back because I don't want them to die. And that's what I do, just because I'm not trying to like get them. If I'm doing it in a video, I catch one, try to get it back in the water as quickly as possible so you can get back down there and I don't have to fish with them.
Yeah, we were talking, what was it last? When we had a fisheries biologist on, and he was talking about the mortality was still high no matter what, even fizzing, not fizzing. If you brought them up, and because we're bringing them up that far, the mortality rate was actually still pretty bad for the fish. And I don't know if Thad Moody's in here or not. He can probably comment on that. He's a fisheries biologist as well. Alex Purrs in the comments. What's up, buddy? He's a little late. Yep. He had to, real quick, I know I forgot to mention it the first, and Alex is going to kick me for saying this. We talked about it Tuesday. We got one of our fellow anglers, Ryan Vader. He is in the hospital. It's a fortunate set of events that got him there, but he's in the hospital. They're trying to raise money for a fundraiser. So any guys in the comments, if y'all are watching, viewing this, we've got a tournament, a kayak tournament going to take place. We've also got a GoFundMe, and you can find it on my you can find on my Facebook, any of my social media. I've got it listed there. Alex Purrs also. Y'all make sure you get over there and do, even if you don't have a kayak. I don't have a kayak. I'm registered for a kayak tournament. It's $40. I'm not going to lose any sleep over losing $40 to a buddy of mine that I think, he's a super nice guy, but he could use y'all's support. And Alex, I'm glad you popped in because I completely forgot and drove the bus right on past that one. So anybody, if y'all, any donation will be much appreciated. I think the last time I looked, we were at about 38% of the goal for the GoFundMe. So, and that's pretty cool. And one of our sponsors, Serve IT, have made a nice donation. So, but we appreciate that. Aaron Young, blade bait and cover water for deep fish with no wood. I got you. Yep.
There's a blade bait they discontinued that I'm so mad about, but it was the Ledge Hog. It was the 1 3/4 3-inch blade bait. That thing was, I have like 40 of them in my tackle box because I just bought all of them when I saw they're getting discontinued. But
the Ledge Hog.
It was like I bought them off their website. You couldn't really get them super easy, but like that's a sweet blade bait. It's like a little bit bigger than the standard. I can throw in a bait caster.
Right.
But I was thinking about making one for core, to be honest, because it's such a good bait. I was like, I need to make that bait again because no one has it. Also, no one was buying it if it got discontinued, so it's maybe not the best business.
I mean, you just don't hear blade bait talked about a whole lot. I mean, it's not one of those, I mean, you hear it talked about, but not quite as much as you would think. And Alex said we got more prizes to give away to those people signed up right now. So then we got more prizes to give away than people signed up. So we need more people to sign up for that tournament. I think last I looked, there was 40 signed up for the tournament. So, like I said, I mean, I'm gonna try to reach out to folks to get a kayak. We got about 15 minutes left. And one of the things I wanted to get you to do, it's as much detail or as little detail as you want to. Walk some folks. Well, there's a couple of things, I guess, and we can touch on both or just whatever. But walk some folks through a lake breakdown process in your head, not necessarily going through a specific lake, but walk down the process. And for folks that have never done it, we're going to a lake and I got to go. I want to fish this lake this weekend, but I have no clue where to go. Give us some key pointers that we can use to go out there and be successful with just a lake breakdown, not necessarily, something you've already done.
Yeah, for sure. I think that really the key when you're on the lake is you want to look for unique things that are happening that are against the normal. And what I mean by that is you want to find scenarios that aren't normally happening on your lake and figure out how those fish can react to that and how you can catch fish that have just started doing something in that moment. So a great example is like we've had a lot of rain here in Oklahoma. So in Oklahoma on Grand Lake, whenever you get a lot of rain, there's going to be runoff into your creeks. And in those runoff areas, the bait fish are going to pile in, the fish are going to pile in. So if you can find those runoff areas, whether you're using Google Earth to figure out where you see run-in, there's a lot of resources that have like run-in points and stuff. Even like CMAP mapping has some of the creek channels that go into the lake. And then you can even look for like man-made dams or little areas on a bridge or a road where you have a culvert. Any of those things where the water's coming in, those areas are going to be a higher potential, and you can basically eliminate a lot of the other parts of your lake if you can see that there's run-in happening in the lake. Another example would be higher than average current. So if your lake right now is getting a lot of rain and then the lake is getting drawn down because of that, and there's normally not that much current this time of year, how can you take advantage of that current? So in like a Lake 10 Killer in Oklahoma where I just went fishing, I'm going to be fishing some bluff walls where the current is going around the wall, and maybe there's an eddy right where the bluff ends, and there's like a turn in the creek bend, and I might fish some of those eddies on the edges of these like channel swing banks, fishing the actual like creek channel swing bank or bluff, things like that. If you're going to fish up shallow, you can also find areas where the water is coming and converging into a narrow point, whether that is a part of an island where you have like an island out in the front and there's this little, area saddle where the water is going to flow over. Can you check those type areas? A bridge obviously is an obvious area for that, but even like a natural creek where the creek really narrows down at the mouth and then it spreads back out. So that's going to funnel that water in and those fish are going to stack up, whether it's offshore or shallow in those areas. So I'm always looking for that sort of stuff first. That's like my number one thing. And there's a million of these scenarios I can think about that. I'm just giving a couple examples, but anything out of the ordinary is kind of where you want to start. And that will hopefully help you narrow your lake down from, like, let's say a giant section of a lake to a smaller zone. Then after that, I try to figure out what style of fishing I want to fish on a given fishing day. Do I want to fish finesse techniques, power techniques? Do I care about which technique? That will determine basically if I want to be in the dirtier water, the clearer water, things like that. Then after all of those things are said and done, I'm going to be looking at historical tournament results and patterns that have done well in the past. So ideally, you want to figure out which zones of the lake have had the most success in that time of the year. What are the kind of general patterns that have done well? And are there any of those patterns happening in the sections of the lake where there's those anomalies? Or if I can't find any of those like weird scenarios happening, at the bare minimum, just go and figure out which zone of the lake has the highest percentage of like top finishes and stuff. Because then you can at least know you're in a lake where there's good or part of the lake where there's good quality fish. And that will then get you kind of in the right mentality of being able to get some fish in the boat. And you really just want to take that lake from a, 100% of the lake down to 20% of the lake that you can really focus on. So you don't have like all these too many options when you get there. Narrow it down. You only have a day of fishing. If you have multiple days of fish, 3 days of practice, then you can go explore everything and go try everything. But if you're just going day of, no practice, you just have the day to fish, you haven't fished in 3 weeks on this lake, take that approach and it's going to get you in the right area. And if you guys want more specifics on that, I actually just started offering one-on-one virtual lessons again on my website. I haven't been doing them for a while, but I decided to kind of do them because I really enjoy doing them. And I got a lot of feedback. People wanting them back. So you can go to fishingmoment.com and I have my one-on-one lessons available where I do breakdowns and will help you prepare for a fishing trip if you want to do that.
I think one of the things that I learned, obviously, taking in your content and stuff like that, I was bad about going out to a big lake, whatever size. And like, I got all that. And that was one of my things getting back into fishing. I got to figure out how to fish these big lakes, and one of the things that, your channel taught me was basically looking at finding, let's say we break it up into a third, lower, middle, and top end of a lake or whatever. And then understanding that that's now the lake. That's the only part. That's the only lake I'm dealing with, is that bottom third, let's say. And then even breaking it down further to that creek arm or whatever, and using that and going, the fish are in this lake, this lake I'm fishing, they're in this part of the lake. Now I got to find out where in this part. And then now that becomes the lake. I'm not fishing 10,000 acres. I'm not fishing 5,000 acres. I'm fishing 100 acres, and it really helped me break that down. And it made a lot of sense. And, like you were talking about those hot spots, I know, one of the things I fish on Wadowee a lot is saddles. I mean, things like that. Go look for those obvious things, long tapering points, saddles, humps. Use your electronics and scan. That was always big for me. And you brought up a point earlier. You were talking about using your electronics and being able to determine the size of the fish. And I know you also offer electronic guides. So, quick. And guys, y'all please help me on this, because that's one of the things I do struggle with, because I go through there, I see the arches, I'm like, I'm fishing, so how do I get to that point where I can look at my graph? I know the graph's got to be set up. How do I get to that point where I can go, yep, that's a 4-pound fish? And we talked about it earlier when you talked about turning the gain down also.
Yeah.
So how do
I have my sonar guides that I have on my website. Again, I have a lot of stuff on the website, fishingmoment.com, but the reason I made those guides, some people just make settings and they're just like, here's a setting, I'm just going to put whatever. And there's like a million settings guides out there. I didn't want to do that. That's not my style. I don't like doing anything kind of just like halfway. So the reason I actually felt confident putting my settings out there is because what I do is I go out with every fish finder that I've had on my boat. And I don't have every fish finder on the market because I just only made guides for the ones I've had. Like, I actually am just posting my HDS Live settings guide, or no, HDS the Pro, sorry, the HDS Pro. I finished that up today. I've had it on the boat since I think August of last year. And I just feel comfortable now posting the settings because I've tested it enough. And my thought process is, I'm going to graph a bunch of fish. Now I'm going to go catch those fish. And I'm going to take screenshots of all of the schools of fish I find. And I'm going to catch them. And I'm going to know that was a 3-pounder. That was a 4-pounder. I then go back and review the sonar recordings. And I say, that's what that arch or that dot or that thing looks like. Then how do I take my settings in a way where I can pop out the fish, reduce all the extra clutter, the extra brush, all the extra stuff, and I know that I'm looking at a 3-pounder or a 4-pounder or a 5-pounder. And what I try to do is, in each of these guides, set the settings in a way where you can see that. And I've already gone through the process of doing that, where I know that with these settings, I'm going to be filtering out a lot of old brush, old timber, old trees. And you're going to be able to see a fish. And a lot of my guides in all my settings, a 1-pound fish is going to be barely visible on my fish finder. Like you would probably think it's a random speck or clutter on the screen. A 2-pound fish is like, you would probably think it's actually just shad or something if you have your normal settings. And then a 3-pound fish actually looks like what you would think a fish is. But I'm setting those settings in a way where, like, I don't want to see a 1-pounder. I don't care about a 1-pounder. I want to catch a 3-pounder. And each unit has a million different settings, and it takes forever to get it dialed in, and with water clarity and the temperature and the type of lake you're on and the depth you're in, all those things make a difference. And you have to just dial it in. It's just spending hours and hours, like basically seeing what you see, validating with a fish catch, going back, making a change, and then doing it in 10 foot of water visibility, 2 foot of water visibility, 6 inches of water visibility, 5 foot of water, 60 foot of water. It's just kind of that process that I go through. So,
and so for guys, also something that I taught with the help of Johnny, he didn't know he was giving. I guess he knew he was giving, but he didn't know I was consuming. But you spend money on electronics, use them. The book that comes with the unit is highly valuable. I have no time how many times I've gotten in the groups, and my background's in avionics, electronics. I get in the Lawrence groups, and they're like, well, can I do a such and such? I'm like, it's literally in the manual that you can do certain things with. And I know that's not the right answer all the time, so I don't answer them, but, read them and use the electronics, because they do some amazing. I've got the carbon units, and there's still stuff on there that I haven't done. Like I wanted to ask how you do screen record. Like I would eventually like to get to where I can do some screen records of stuff, but that's way past my even want to get into for something like that. I'm always impressed with your screen records on your videos, because that helped me get over a large amount of, taking in that knowledge on that stuff. And Aaron Young had a good point. Fish small areas that most guys won't stop for, small pockets and short sections of banks. Many guys only stop for big pockets and big stretches of bank type. And that's one thing I have noticed. An area of the lake that I fish on Wedowee, guys will zoom to other ends, and I'm stopping in there and catching, fairly good amount of fish and, decent size at the time. So that's another good point, Aaron. Thanks for that. Y'all got any more questions?
By the way, for a Silver Punk over here, I do have the hook reveal triple shot guide, just so you know.
Okay. Do you have the setting guide for the hook reveal? Okay, cool. Good deal.
Sorry.
When you're idling and you're looking for fish, what does it take to get you to stop? 3 arches, 5 arches? Because I think a lot of times people are looking for that egg school.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have found more times than not is I might see 4 or 5. Then I turn around and I pan it with live. Ain't 4 or 5. It's 15 or 20. What of that makes you stop? Because I'm the same way. I run carbons on the back and live up front. Just what I have, Lawrence's. But I run side scan, down scan, and 2D. And a lot of times I won't see them on down, but I'll get that blurb. I think it's palette 13 or whatever it is. You'll get that big red blurb that's just hugging the bottom. What does it take you to say, I need to stop here?
So usually what I do is, if I can see 2 fish that I think are of the 3-pound caliber, and I regraph the area 2 different times. So I graph it once. If I can graph it again, it means that there's a chance that those fish are actually setting up on the piece of cover, especially without forward facing. Right. And then if I graph it like a third time, I'm like guaranteed they're actually set up there. So I'll fish it without forward facing. So I need to see at least 2 arches or whatever that are the right size, whether it's around timber or brush piles, doesn't matter. And when I regraph it, I catch out a fish. Because what, to your point, most of the time I'm probably not seeing the same fish the second time I graph over it. From like what you see with forward facing, you see 3, 4, 5 arches, there's 15, 20 fish. If you see 8 arches, there's probably 50 fish there. It's just kind of one of those deals. With the forward facing, what's tricky is that I want to graph, and my ideal is that if I graph for 1 minute and I see 5 arches that are in the 3+ pound range, I'm stopping. That's my rule of thumb. So if I graph for a minute, that means that there's enough good fish in the area, and I actually just look at the clock. As soon as I see a fish and I know I'm forward facing, I see that, I go around for a minute. I've seen 5 of the arches. Now I know there's probably like, I don't know, 20 plus 3-pounders in the area. That's enough for me to then drop the forward facing to then start throwing at him, because I know I at least have 20 targets probably to cast at, and then as a result, I'm going to get maybe 3 bites, 5 bites, maybe if I'm lucky,
And that's what I fell into, is the fact of, and like I said, I came from South Louisiana. We used depth finders to know if we could take off and where we could shut down.
Yeah,
we didn't need them. We were in the Chaffalaya Spillway. It's that deep on a good day. And when I get to Guntersville, or I moved to Georgia, and there was more of that, and even on a little bit on Rayburn and Toledo, I fished there a good bit. I was always looking for the mega. I was looking for what is on simulator on Lowrance.
yeah,
that don't exist very often.
No.
Every once in a while you'll run across that, but I think I've had people in my boat and go, how do you what did you see? I said, well, there's 2 or 3 dots here. And they're like, that's it? I'm like, maybe, but let's take a look. And you start looking, and it seems to be more. So
yeah. Johnny, we had one more question from Mike Geiger. Do you have it for any settings for hummingbirds on your website?
I have the Helix Gen 3. That's the only one I have for hummingbird, though, the Helix Gen 3. And I haven't had my chance to really get my hands on any of the other hummingbird stuff. So,
and we've hit that 2-hour mark. I don't want to. He's been super nice to stay with for the full 2 hours. I don't want to hold him up any longer.
Absolutely.
Before we let you go, tell everybody where they can find you on any platform, and where they can find your stuff at.
If you just Google Fish the Moment, you'll find me on Google. My website should pop up first link. And then on there, I have all my links on my Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. I'm on everything. So feel free to, follow me on anything. I try to give away as much really good info as I can. I do have some stuff that I do that's kind of like paid instruction and stuff, just to, it helps subsidize doing YouTube for a living, because you can't make just a living off just YouTube. So I appreciate everyone who supports me there as well. And I try to do my best to give the highest quality content I can, and really spend a lot of time. I'm pretty picky about that sort of stuff, where I don't like to just put out a bunch of, bad stuff. I don't know. I can't sleep at night if I do that. So anyway,
well, we appreciate it. Also, he has a little tackle company called Core Tackle, just in case you guys didn't know it. So make sure you can check out his stuff there. I know he didn't want to talk about it anymore, but I'm going to throw it out there again. It's some pretty cool stuff we got to see here tonight. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Unless you guys got any more questions, I don't want to hold him up any longer. 2 hours
I just want to say thank you for sharing that info with us and taking time. I personally have learned a lot from your content, and I encourage anyone that's watching out there to follow Jonny. You'll learn a lot, and it'll make your angling game a whole lot better.
I really appreciate that.
And ATL Outdoors, I forgot to tell you earlier, you win a CT12 ARC crankbait. I just realized I didn't say what bait he won. So if he's still in here, that's what you win.
He was happy about winning.
Yes, I forgot all about it. So, Jonny, thank you so much for coming on with us tonight. Have a good weekend, and we appreciate it. And you're welcome back anytime.
Sounds good. Yeah, just let me know. I'm happy to come back on the show anytime. I appreciate the opportunity tonight, guys. It was great talking to you.
Back on. There we go. We're back.
Sorry, no idea what happened.
I said have a good weekend.
The showed up.
Yep. I said have a good weekend. The computer said okay.
So I was about to be like, I can do another hour if you guys want to roll. I can just like.
Man, you are welcome back. Any of you and your cohorts.
Seriously, I
anytime.
mean, I'll shoot you Danny's contact info for the shop and everything. He's the one to talk to about anything. But yeah, we'd love to have you back on if you ever want to do another show. Are you going to ICAST? Is the other question we had in the thing.
Yeah, I'll be at ICAST.
All right, we'll all be at. A couple of us are going to ICAST. Danny, myself, Tim, and a couple of the other guys are going to ICAST. We'll see you down there.
Perfect. Yeah. Again, anytime you want to have me on the show, happy to come on. It was a lot of fun. I always love talking.
Awesome.
Absolutely,
man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Have a good weekend, folks. If you're out there fishing, be safe. Remember to go support Ryan Veeder and his effort to get healed up from the accident and then finding the cancer and stuff like that. He's got a long road to go. Make sure you go check him out. We appreciate it. Y'all have a good evening.